Hello and welcome to this special edition of Power and Politics, a special online-only edition, a by-election night special because it's by-election night in Canada. I'm Éric Grenier, the CBC's polls analyst. I'll be joined shortly by Vassy, Kapelos, the host of Power and Politics. She's right now just speaking with The National. So we're here to talk about the federal by-elections that are taking place across the country. The polls are now closed in York-Simcoe in Ontario, in Burnaby South in British Columbia, and Outremont in Quebec. So we're going to be here all night with you as the results come in, talking about those results, and we'll see if we can also hear Jagmeet Singh speak later on, the leader of the NDP, if and when the results come in that by-election. So here tonight we got a few things. We have the results that are going to be on this screen over here. This is the Elections Canada site. So we're going to be following these results with you, and maybe we'll see if we have the same frustrations in terms of getting this to load as the night goes on. I think a lot of people will be refreshing. Over on this side, we'll also have an election map that I will be exploring throughout the night. It's one of the features that we'll be using throughout the year as we go towards the fall federal election. So why are we doing this by-election special tonight? It's because there's 3 by-elections that are taking place, and they are pretty big ones. 2 of them are NDP seats. Burnaby South in British Columbia is, of course, where NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is putting his own political future on the line. He needs a seat in the House of Commons. It'll be up to the voters in Burnaby South to give him one. Also on the line is the riding of Outremont in Quebec. Now, this is, of course, where Tom Mulcair won in 2007, beginning the Orange Wave, which eventually flooded the province in 2011. And then there's a riding in York-Simcoe that's a Conservative stronghold, but we'll be watching to see how the People's Party does in that riding in particular. It's one of those GTA ridings. It is a Conservative stronghold, but we'll be curious to see how Maxime Bernier's party does. So we'll be taking your questions throughout the night. So it's going to be a long night as these results start coming in. So if you have any questions, you can reach us on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook, on the various channels. You can find them throughout on the Power and Politics YouTube page, Facebook page, the CBC Politics. You can see it right there. Right. All right, there. I'm working on this for the first time. So we got some results that are starting to come in. Now, these are still just early results here. So let's just take a quick look at them. So right now, we are looking at really first results in both Outremont and York-Simcoe, which closed at 9:30. So they had a little bit of time to count the votes. Right now in Outremont, we're seeing that the Liberals do have an early lead with about 75% to 15% for the NDP's Julia Sanchez. Rachel Bendayan is the Liberal candidate there. She ran against Tom Mulcair in 2015, so she's looking to get that seat now that Tom Mulcair has resigned as NDP MP and he's now a political commentator. We're also seeing early results in the riding of York-Simcoe. There, Scott Davidson, the Conservative candidate, is also out to an early and commanding lead, but we're talking very early results. Only 1 poll box has been opened and counted in Outremont, only 3 in York-Simcoe, so still very early results there. And you can see the candidates that will be contesting the seat in York-Simcoe tonight. Scott Davidson would be considered the favorite. As I said, this was a Conservative stronghold for a long time. Peter Van Loan was the Conservative MP for the riding. He was a former cabinet minister as well. The Conservatives held this riding since 2004. Before that, if you combine the old PC, Canadian Alliance, or Reform votes, Conservative candidates have gotten the most votes in the riding of York-Simcoe since 1979. So we're not exactly expecting an upset there tonight. So we're still going to be waiting to see as these results come in. As I said, it is still early going, and it'll take some time before we're ready to make any projections. But why don't I just show you this fun map, because I'm excited about this map. So this is something that we're going to be looking at throughout the campaign, and it gives us an idea of where these ridings really are. So let's start with Outremont, which is of course, on the island of Montreal. It's that riding right there. Now you can see that this is all now Liberal red, but if we look at where things were in 2011, there's a lot more NDP orange on the island of Montreal. So right now we do know that the Liberals are going to be targeting not only Outremont, but really these other seats as well. You're looking at Rosemont, Petite Patrie, that's Alexandre Boulay-Risse's riding. That might be the last stronghold for the NDP on the island of Montreal. 2 other ridings as well, Hochelaga and Laurier Sainte-Marie, which was, of course, Gilles Ducep's old riding. And then there's a block riding up in the corner. So this is where the battleground for Outremont is tonight. Right in the center, this is an area that voted for Quebec Solidaire in the provincial election in Quebec just in October. So it is a progressive area. And even when the NDP was not a real factor in Quebec, before the 2007 breakthrough of Tom Mulcair, they could still count on double digits in that riding. So the NDP will be looking for more than that. So let's go out now to Ontario. This is York Simcoe, which is just north of Toronto. You can see it right there, just north of the band of seats that are around Toronto. Now, what's really interesting about this riding, yes, it is in central Ontario, a bit more of a rural area. There's not a huge urban center in York Simcoe. But if you look at 2011, all of this area was Conservative blue. This is what delivered the Conservative majority in 2011. But you can see in 2015, it delivered the Liberal majority. And the Liberal seats went all the way just to the borders of York Simcoe. So while we're not expecting that the Liberals are going to be very strong in this riding, it is still a riding where there is a contest between the two parties. The Liberals, while they might not expect to be taking the riding, they want to put up some good numbers to show that they still have some support in the wider GTA. The Conservatives don't want to see a big number for Maxime Bernier's People's Party, because if the People's Party is taking 5–10% of the vote in some of these GTA ridings, a lot of them aren't going to flip over to Andrew Scheer. And then finally, the race that we're going to be watching, probably the longest tonight, and also the one where we probably also care most about the result because it's going to have impact throughout this election year, is Burnaby South. So this is just to the east of Vancouver, the center of Vancouver. This is a riding that has voted for the NDP since 2004. If you're looking at the boundaries, and they've changed over the years, it used to be split between two ridings. But this has been a pretty good NDP riding for quite some time. But even back in 2004, 2006, 2008, 2011, and 2015, it was not a walk for the NDP. They always won this riding by pretty thin margins over the Conservatives, over the Liberals. It was only 547 votes that Kennedy Stewart won this riding in 2015. And of course, he is now the mayor of Vancouver. So let's look back at the results as they're starting to come in, because we're still pretty early on, so we don't really know exactly what the projection will be. We're not going to be projecting the results for some time. But remember, we are going to be taking your questions throughout the night because these results are going to be counted sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but we'll take your questions as they come in and try to answer as many as we can. So we're still very early on. We're still only looking at 2% of the votes that have been counted in the riding of York Simcoe. You can see there Scott Davidson does have a good lead at this stage. Now, the Conservatives took 50% of the vote in this riding in 2015, so they're going to be wanting more than that. So right now they're at 54, but again, still extremely early. And we're still waiting for the second polling box to be opened in Outremont, but the results there at this stage still looking good for the Liberals, but really early going. And it does matter where these votes are being counted, and that's one of the things that happens when we're watching these kinds of results come in. Parts of York Simcoe, for example, were pretty solidly Conservative, but other parts, like the Bradford West Gwillimbury, was an area where the Liberals had a bit more support. So it depends on where the numbers are coming in. In Outremont as well, the eastern corner of the riding was a bit more Liberal than the rest of the riding, which voted more solidly for the NDP. So that is one of the other things, as we see these results come in, that you need to remember where the votes are coming in, but we don't know where they're coming in. So that's something that we just don't know. If you've watched John King on CNN, he knows where all those counties are reporting on election night in the United States. We don't know that. We don't get that information from Elections Canada. So that's why we have to wait. We got to wait until all the votes are counted, or at least enough votes that we can start to see a trend line, and our decision desk is able to make some calls. So just to remind you that, again, we will be taking your questions throughout the night, so do send them in. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. You can send us a smoke signal. You can send us a telegram, and we'll try to answer your questions. I'm waiting for Vassy Kapelos, who is speaking with the National tonight about these by-elections, so she'll be joining us very shortly, and that way we'll be able to go back and forth. So we're going to start taking some questions right now. Now, while I'm on my own, I got to read them off my phone, so I apologize for that. Dave Delaney on YouTube asks, what's the last Burnaby South poll? So we saw a poll from Burnaby South early on in the campaign, back in mid-January, and that poll, which had been done by Main Street Research, had shown that Jagmeet Singh was ahead of the Liberal candidate, who at the time was Karen Wang. Now, Karen Wang was the Liberal candidate who had communicated on WeChat, saying that, voters, communicating that, she was the only Chinese Canadian candidate in the race, whereas Jagmeet Singh was an Indian Canadian. And because of that, she ended up resigning. She wanted to get the candidate's nomination back from the Liberal Party. Liberals did not give it back. So instead, who the Liberals have, they have Richard T. Lee, who is running for the Liberal Party against Jagmeet Singh. Is probably the biggest competition for the New Democrats in Burnaby South, because Richard T. Lee was the MLA for a provincial riding that was part of Burnaby South. It was more in the northern side of Burnaby rather than the southern portion. But he does have at least some recognition within Burnaby. He was the MLA for 16 years. He was defeated in the 2017 provincial election. So he does have some networks there. He has some name recognition. So he could give the New Democrats a bit of a run for their money. But Jagmeet Singh, still considered the favorite in this race. As I said, it has a long history of voting for the NDP. And they've been pouring resources. They've been pouring effort into this riding. Jagmeet Singh has rented a place there. He's living there with his wife. He's been campaigning for weeks on end as things have been going on here in Ottawa. He is still knocking on the doors in Burnaby South. So there is the expectation that'll pay off and he'll be able to win that riding. Jay Shin for the Conservatives is running as well. And Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson, who is the People's Party candidate, she's been getting a lot of attention throughout this race. When she's been at some of the debates that have been taking place in Burnaby South, a lot of her supporters have gone, have made a lot of noise and been cheering her on. So we're pretty curious to see what her results will be in Burnaby South, if the People's Party will have any sort of impact there. Certainly, she would be the highest profile candidate of the three that the People's Party has running in the various ridings. So that is what we'll be looking to see there, and maybe to see how that compares to the Conservative numbers. If the Conservative and People's Party numbers combine would put a united Conservative candidate more in the running, that'll be something that'll be pretty instructive. So we're still waiting on some of these polls to be counted. So we'll take a couple questions now from Marlo Turner Ritchie, Facebook. Do we have the new polling machines in Quebec, the fast tabulating ones? We don't. Elections Canada doesn't really want to go in that route, as we've seen in some other areas like Ontario and New Brunswick, where they have the tabulators. They have a mixed record, let's just call it that, in some areas. And Vassy is right now. She's there. She's getting her seat now. Give me a moment, yeah. Yeah, she'll get connected and then she'll take the mic away from me. But yeah, so no, Elections Canada is still counting votes the old-fashioned way. One of the reasons that maybe that is actually a positive thing with all of this concern about the potential for tampering or foreign interference in elections, having an old-fashioned way of counting the votes, a way that really hasn't changed since the time of horse and buggy, might be a good thing in that sense. Horse and buggy. So yeah, we'll talk about horses and buggies.
We're already back. Horse and buggy.
So I will now pass off to Vassy, who will give me a little bit of a relief here.
Yes, a little bit. Thank you, Éric. That's a lot of talking for 10 minutes.
It is, yes. So I've already laid out the scene.
Okay.
We're waiting for more results to come in. We only have a couple polls so far.
There's a couple polls, but that the Liberals kind of have a bit of a comfortable lead.
They do, although
in Outremont, and then but in very minimal polls reporting, right?
Yeah, we only have one box reporting in Outremont. So
okay.
Long way to go.
Okay, long way to go. That's exciting. I'm so happy to be here with you guys. Thanks for your patience, and thanks to Éric for filling 11 minutes of time, which
carrying
is
the ball.
a million years in TV time. Let's start with some questions. Have you taken any questions?
I've taken a couple.
You have? Okay, so forgive me if I'm repeating. Oh, we have a fresh batch. Okay. Well, I'll start. Have we gone through the Instagram questions already?
No, I don't know.
Okay, I'm going to hit some Instagram ones. Will the PPC's performance in York Simcoe be an indicator of how they might perform in the GTA?
Yeah, we talked about that. How no, like you and I had. Talked
okay.
about
I thought you meant already.
Yeah, that might be more of a riding that might be more indicative of the People's Party support, because in Burnaby South you have Laura Lynn Thompson, who a bit of a polarizing candidate.
Right.
Has a pre-existing support base because of her position on sex education, and she's a well-known social conservative in the area. Whereas York Simcoe is a conservative riding. If you're a conservative voter who is not happy with the way things are going with Andrew Scheer, maybe you have permission in a riding like that to go over to another party, if you might feel that way. And Outremont is, it's in the island of Montreal, very diverse riding, maybe not the kind of place that the People's Party would be expecting to do very well.
How much of an indicator do you think these by-elections are going to be for the federal election, for the People's Party of Canada specifically? I mean, it's a brand new party came about in the fall, basically after Maxime Bernier split off from the Conservatives. We put a lot of stock in they ran 3 candidates. It's fascinating to see what kind of results they may get. But how much stock can you really put in the results where the PPC is concerned?
Yeah, I think you can put a little bit of at least, because this is the first real test that we're getting for the People's Party. We've had the fundraising numbers that they have put out,
right,
and they're pretty good fundraising numbers for a party that just didn't exist a couple months ago. And so this is the first time that actual people are going to be casting ballots for a People's Party candidate, for Maxime Bernier's party. So I think this is a good test for them just to see where they're going to register. If they're going to be at 2-3%, in a by-election, some of the minor parties sometimes get that. There was a by-election, the first one in Medicine Hat, I think it was in 2006, where the Christian Heritage Party finished ahead of the NDP. Oh. So you can sometimes have weird results like that for these small parties. So if Maxime Bernier is only getting 2 to 3% of the vote, I think if you're into sheer, you're breathing a sigh of relief.
At what point do you start panicking? If you're over 5, or
yeah, I think 5% would be the kind of number that if they're able to pull that much, that would be a problem for the Conservatives, because 5% in a lot of these GTA ridings in particular, that'll make the difference, right? So, and a lot of those voters probably are Conservative voters. Not all of them. Some of them might be people who stayed home. Maxime Bernier said that one of the things he wants to do is bring out new people. So, it's. I think that would be the kind of number that would start to make the Conservatives worry that in some ridings, Maxime Bernier could cost them the seat.
What effect, I should say, Anson_Yeg, yay, shout out to Edmonton. What effect will the SNC-Lavalin Wilson-Raybould issue have? And he's asking, or she's asking specifically about Outremont, but do you think these by-elections are going to be an indicator at all of whether people are... I noticed like a lot of our reporters were in the various ridings today and they were asking people, oh, what's on your mind? Very few of them were saying, I mean, at this juncture, it's still very much happening and in the weeds, but I don't know if people have, is this what they're, is this what they're going to the polls on?
Yeah, I think it's still really early, so it might be hard for a lot of people to know even what to think of it.
Right.
So, if you're already someone who's predisposed not to support the Liberals, or you're someone who are on the fence, maybe this is the kind of thing that makes you not want to go out and vote for them. Whether that'll still be the case in October is a completely different question. But one of the things, the advanced polling days were taking place just over the weekend, just after Jody Wilson-Raybould had resigned. It was just before Jerry Butts had resigned. Not a very good weekend if you're a Liberal supporter, right? So if they didn't get their people out to vote in the advanced polls, will that have an impact? If those people were not feeling like, I'm not really all that jazzed to go out and vote for the Liberals this weekend, I wonder if that might have a bit of an impact.
That's an interesting point, yeah.
We
should note that also there's some news tonight on that story that the Prime Minister has waived confidence, waived solicitor-client privilege. So we should expect, we don't know the exact day or time yet, but Jody Wilson-Raybould basically is free to answer questions on the... Oh, we have a decision desk projecting.
This is exciting.
Wow, okay.
And
let's see. Never mind what I was saying. This is way more exciting. Okay, projecting the Conservatives will win in York Simcoe.
Heard it here first.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're projecting.
Very
Scott
exciting.
Woo! Yeah. We're having some trouble getting these numbers refreshed because there's not a lot here right now. But this is the one that I think we thought was the easiest one to call.
Definitely.
So it's not surprising that it took this, it happened this quickly that Scott Davidson has been projected the winner in York Simcoe.
And what can you tell us about Mr. Davidson? Do we
not
know
too much.
Not too much.
I do know that...
We know a lot about Peter Van Loan, who occupied that
thing.
seat for a number of years. Very well known around Ottawa and Parliament Hill. So, you had been saying for a long time that this was very unlikely to go.
Yeah, maybe that's why we didn't pay enough attention to that. Yeah, because Scott Davidson is projecting now that he will be going to the House of Commons, taking over from Peter Van Loan. And like you said, this was the one that was probably the easiest to call. Very bad weather in York Simcoe today. In that area.
My gosh, did you see poor Jacqueline Hansen all day reporting from there?
Turnout's probably not going to be very high.
Yeah, it didn't look like turnout was going to be huge anywhere, really. That was a common thread. All the reporters that we talked to today were saying, polls are kind of slow here. It's anecdotal, but we shall see. We know that the advance voting wasn't too high in Burnaby especially.
It's only about 5% of people went out to vote in the advance polling, which is less than half of what it usually is. Usually 10 to 12% or something like that.
Right.
So that's Scott Davidson, and that's the first one off the board.
Any more
Still not
results
having
there?
these results
No,
come in. Maybe if someone has seeing them, they can tell me in my ear what the
Yes.
the results are, because
The all-powerful people in the control room.
yeah, because everybody is refreshing this page and it's not coming up for us.
So what we can tell you, though, is Decision Desk is projecting, as we said, that the Conservative Scott Davidson will win in the riding of York-Simcoe, which is kind of the edges of the GTA. So
Yeah.
very important area for this federal election, right?
Yeah, and
Competitive area.
And I just heard in my ear that he's right now at about 51.4% of the vote. So that is a bit better than where Peter Van Loan was in 2015. So that is a early sign that the Conservatives are able to get their vote out. But 51%, if they end up this night only gaining 1 or 2 points in a riding like York-Simcoe, that's not going to cut it. They need to
Why?
be. Well, if they're going to be winning seats in Ontario, they need to be picking up 5-10 points in 2015. So in a riding like York-Simcoe, if they're only up a point, that's not going to deliver a lot of seats nationwide, or province-wide. So maybe also, what was the People's Party candidate, Tyler, in my ear?
Hold on, I can
Only
find
1.8%. So it's not, I guess it's not
that's
much of a problem
interesting.
there.
Ooh, 1.8%.
And that we're at 18% of the polls have reporting in York-Simcoe and not seeing particularly strong results for either the Conservative candidate or the People's Party. So we'll have to wait and see
People's
where
Party
things
is
will end up.
Robert Gertz.
Oh, now I got them. Now I got them
you've
up
got
on my
some?
screen. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So right now we got the 50% for Scott Davidson. The Liberal candidate Sean Tanaka is at 30.5%, and then we have the NDP at 8.5%. The PCs, which are the Progressive Canadian Party. Dorian Baxter is actually the leader of this party, which wanted to take the place of the Progressive Conservatives after it disappeared, is actually at 4.9%. So that's actually a strong result for them, because they're currently placing ahead of the Greens, who are at 3.2%, and Robert Gertz at just 1.8% right now. Also, a little bit of a trivia. John Turmel, and we looked at this
Get ready
earlier.
for this, yeah.
This is his 97th election run. He is apparently a Guinness World Record holder. He runs everywhere. He ran in provincial.
He needs to be on this special. That's amazing.
Yeah, well,
97
he's run in provincial by-elections in Quebec, in Ontario, throughout, all over the place, and he's never won a single time. But he keeps running up that number, 97. So anyway, so yeah, Scott Davidson off to projecting now that he will win the seat. But not with I mean, it's he's winning by 20 points. Obviously, it's a strong result.
Right.
But this is the kind of riding where if the Conservatives are forming a government, they should be getting 60% of the vote, something more like that. So
now I guess we look towards Outremont to see when results are coming there. It seemed like it was a bit of an early lead, obviously, for the Liberals, but might make projections there happen a bit sooner.
Well, we're now looking at this now. We got 24% of the votes now counted in Outremont. And you can see there, Rachel Bendian right now is at 44.5% of ballots cast so far. I think that would be a pretty good result for the Liberals. That's pretty much where Tom Mulcair was in 2015. That's how much
And
of the
where
vote
are the
he
NDP
took.
right now?
The NDP's at 23.7 for Julia Sanchez.
Big difference.
Yeah, that is a big difference. Again, that's a 20-point
But they
lead
hit
for
that
the Liberals.
20% mark that
That's
you said
right.
they had to in
Yeah.
order to
Yeah, when I was
breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief.
Yeah, when I was handicapping this, I figured that the 20 to 25% mark for the NDP would be the area where they'd be okay.
Right.
Okay with that result, because that is the NDP before 2007 could count on 17% of the vote there. So it at least showed that they still have some base in the riding. But still, that is a drop of almost 20 points for the NDP in Outremont. A lot of that would be Tom Mulcair. So just losing the leader is going to cost you some points right to begin with.
Right.
But it's not a disaster result for the NDP, but to be at 24% is not very good. Interesting right now in third place is the Green Party candidate, Daniel Green, who's a deputy leader for the Green Party. Bloc Québécois is now at 10. Only 6% for the Conservatives, 2% for the People's Party.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So we'll be watching still Outremont. That's not an official projection yet, but we are awaiting that, and we are projecting. The Decision Desk is projecting that the Conservatives will take the by-election riding of York-Simcoe. I'm going to take some more questions. Jeff Townsend on YouTube asks, does poor turnout favor the NDP or the Liberals in BC?
Oh, in BC, I would say the poor turnout would favor the NDP. Because usually the poor turnout favors the incumbent, because that usually suggests there's not a huge enthusiasm for voting out the incumbent. So that would probably be a good sign for the NDP. But we saw in the advanced polls that the turnout was a little bit higher in Burnaby South than it was in the others, but still lowish. So, probably still going to end up at 35-40% by the end of the night in terms of turnout, just based on historical trends and where things are.
Okay, if this was another question based on Outremont, you kind of answered it, but let's, Alex Guibord, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, on Facebook asks, if they don't win, what % of the popular vote does the NDP need in Outremont to avoid complete panic?
Yeah, I think we said,
right?
the 20% mark would be the number they would need because, like I said, in 2006, the party did not win a single seat in Quebec, and they still had 17% of the vote in Outremont. It's a progressive riding, it's a downtown riding. It's the kind of riding where the NDP should be able to pull a certain amount of the vote, so at least beating that kind of record. But still, this is a riding that is very solidly for Quebec Solidaire at the provincial level, which is a sovereignist party, but it's a left-wing party. And the NDP is not really in the running for it. They are in a solid second, which I think is good news for them, in the sense that they want to at least be the alternative party in these urban ridings in Montreal. But I know that this was still within the kind of the range of what we would have expected. I think they would have liked something better still.
I have to interrupt you because the decision desk is now projecting that the Liberal candidate in Outremont will take that by-election.
Rachel Mendiant.
Yeah, Rachel Mendiant. Julia Sanchez was the candidate for the NDP. So this is Tom Mulcair's old riding, as we've been discussing tonight. Tom Mulcair, the former leader of the NDP. He won that riding, stole it from the clutches of the Liberals. They had held the riding from 1935, I believe, to 2007.
Yeah, with the exception of, I think, 1988.
Right.
PC's won it once.
Okay, they won it once. So this is a switch. This is something that you had you had been predicting. This isn't a huge surprise that the Liberals would win in Outremont, but probably they're happy about it. Obviously, Quebec is very important.
Yeah, and I think that number for them, 46%, is actually a pretty strong result for them, because if you look back in 2006, they had 35% of the vote, the Liberals did. 2004, the previous time they had formed a government, they still had 41% of the vote. So the Liberals are doing pretty well in Outremont, because this is a gain of about 12 points from where they were in 2015. It's not going to go like that, but if they gain 12 points across the province, they're winning 60, 65 seats in Quebec.
Wow.
Right? So it's kind of the benchmark kind of number. For them, I think that's a pretty strong result. For the other parties, though, for the NDP, like I said, a disappointing result, but the Greens at 12% is actually probably the most surprising number out of all of these. Actually.
Really? Yeah. We had a question about the Greens, if I can find it. Excuse me. I think they were wanting to look at the Greens in a... Sorry, I had it for 1 second and now should we watch how the Greens do in York Simcoe with the general in the fall in mind?
Well, York Simcoe, not really.
Or here
Green
or anywhere. I mean, they're obviously not in Burnaby, but...
Yeah, 3% in York Simcoe, which is sort of what you'd expect from them in that riding. But yeah, the 12% in Outremont, there has been some polls in Quebec that have shown the Greens are doing not too bad for the Green Party. Like, they're not moving ahead of the other main parties there. But
what do you think that's a result of?
Well, you know what? It is Daniel Green who is the deputy leader. He does have a bit of a profile. His name is also very convenient for a Green Party candidate, Daniel Green. But he ran in a by-election in Saint Laurent a few years ago, so he's got a bit of a track record now running for the party. And I think that for a lot of voters...
The issue important?
I think, because right now in Quebec, climate change and the environment is really one of the most important issues in a way that we're not seeing in other provinces.
That's fascinating, yeah.
So maybe for a lot of these voters who had voted for the NDP in the past, because the NDP is down 20 points, and the Liberals are only picking up about half of that. So a lot of these voters might have decided that if I'm...
Would you have predicted the Green would take a portion of that other half?
No, because, we were talking about where the Bloc would end up, or where the Conservatives would end up. But I don't think we were expecting the Greens to finish third in a riding like Outremont.
What does it say about the Bloc? The Bloc has a new leader. We had him on the show. It seemed like they had raised a bit of money. They seemed to be, their poll numbers got a bit of a bump after he became the leader. What do you read into this?
Well, for them, 9.3%, which is where we have them right now, with 32% of the ballots counted. That's a bit better than last year. It's only about a point up from where they were in 2015. I think they would have liked to shown a little bit more life than that with a new leader. The Bloc used to be the second party in Outremont. It used to be a Liberal Bloc contest. The Bloc could count on 35% of the vote. It was more or less they were getting the NDP vote from the last few elections. Those progressive voters are going to the Bloc. So I don't think they're going to be too happy with those results, because I think while it's not the kind of riding that you'd expect them to win, a little bit more momentum, because we've seen polls have been a bit better for the Bloc in Quebec, but I think that it's pretty interesting to think of how much of that Green vote might have gone to the Bloc, because the Bloc with Yves-François Blanchet, he's a former environment minister.
Yeah, I was going to say they're very, he's big on climate and talking about it.
So they're going to try and push environmentalism as a way to make the message that Quebec's views on environment are different from the rest of the country. So that's why the Bloc would be the... Oh, we've got some votes coming in from Burnaby South.
Oh, we do?
I just noticed this. This is very exciting here.
Oh, okay.
We only got one counted. Well, we got 43 votes counted, but it's looking like it could be actually pretty interesting. This one polling box, we don't know where it was counted or anything like that, but we got
Richard Lee.
Richard Lee in second place at 26, Singh at 35 in the lead. And in third place is the People's Party candidate with 21% of the vote. So pretty interesting right now, but
that's fascinating.
it is just 43 votes. Yeah.
Yeah, so very early. So we should recap that the decision desk is projecting that the Conservatives will take the by-election in York-Simcoe, and the Liberals have won in Outremont, Montreal in Quebec. So those are two of the three by-elections we're watching tonight. The other one, of course, is the big one in Burnaby South. The NDP's leader, Jagmeet Singh, is running there for a seat. I've said this all night. I've mixed up the two words. A seat in the House of Commons. A big deal for that party. A lot of questions. The majority of questions I find that we are getting in is about Jagmeet Singh, what happens to him if he wins, if he loses. What will happen? I mean, I have a bunch of questions here asking, can he stay on? Will he be forced to resign? That is, if he were to lose. Do you think it matters by how much he wins?
I don't think it matters that much. The other two ridings, it's a bit more interesting to see where everybody else ends up and what level of the vote they get. For the NDP, they just need a win. They haven't had a win in a long time under Jagmeet Singh, where they're not doing well in the polls at about 14% nationwide, which would be the worst result since 2000. They haven't had good fundraising under Singh, and he had been a really effective fundraiser during the leadership race.
Right.
But he hasn't been able to translate that into fundraising for the party. So they just need a win. They need him to get in the House and impress people there and get something going for the party.
We had another good question. I don't know, I'm just remembering it off the top of my head, but how much impact, and this is sort of more analysis for us, but how much impact how important is being in the House, given that we are in the last stretch of the sitting? And it sounds like a lot, like we still have March, April, May, June, but there's actually a lot less, there's more break weeks, I find, in this portion of the sitting. Yeah, I think there's like 55 or 56 days, basically, where he'll be able to sit in the House. How much of a difference, how important is that? Yeah,
well, we saw with Tom Mulcair that he was seen as a pretty effective person in the House, didn't really get great results in the end, although they were leading in the polls going into that campaign. But Singh's been out of the House, and it's not working, right? So maybe in a different scenario, it could work to not have a seat in the House, that it's not a big deal. But Singh hasn't made it work being outside of the House, right? He said he didn't need a seat in the House, that he could go around the country and talk to voters. It doesn't seem to have been helping the party. So they need something different. Getting him in the House, putting him on the same stage as Andrew Scheer and Justin Trudeau might help him.
Yeah, I think not just for his own profile and sort of, I know it's, a lot of people say it's the bubble and stuff, but to sort of be on the same level in the House with Andrew Scheer, with Justin Trudeau, asking the Prime Minister questions directly, looking like but I think from the other point of view is also representing caucus and being there to lead your party, because we have seen a lot of NDP MPs who aren't running, a number of sort of stories. Hannah Thibodeau has reported very effectively on a lot of the rumblings within caucus. We saw instances where Jagmeet Singh didn't seem especially clear on what the party's policy will be. So then it leads you to ask, well, who's directing that? Who's figuring? I just think, from the perspective of looking like the leader of the party, this can only help him.
Yeah.
Should he win, which we don't know for sure,
We have a few more votes counted now. We're up to still only at 2.5% of the vote counted, but Singh is still holding on to that lead. He's got 40% of 366 votes. So again, still extremely early counting right now, but we still see that Richard Lee is in second with 25%, and now the Conservative candidate Jay Shin has moved into third with 19. and Laura Lynn Thompson of the People's Party in fourth with 15%. I think Maxime Bernier would be pretty happy with 15% if he...
Yeah, he told me last week if they were to get 8 in that riding, that would be, he was looking at that as a, I mean, he was pretty honest. He was saying, like, you know, we're a brand new party. If we can get 8, that's pretty good showing. So I'm sure 15, if it stays there, around 15% will be. I mean, she was a interesting candidate, you could say. She was polarizing, as you said. He was, I remember doing an interview with him right when the sort of by-election campaign started, putting some of her comments that she had made to him, and he was very, he would not take his own position on them, which is, I find, something that he does often, but he said they're willing to have whatever views they want, even, and I think I asked, even if they are labeled homophobic, and he said, it's their opinion, you know, like, go for it. And clearly I think he was campaigning with her pretty recently as well, so interesting dynamic there.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And sorry, I just lost my results here.
Oh, no.
I'll get them back. Just figure out
You're looking here at the candidates in Burnaby South. So we've got Jagmeet Singh, of course, the leader of the NDP party, and Richard Lee, who, that's a whole other interesting story. So a longtime Liberal MLA in the province. He's running for the federal Liberals because he actually replaced another candidate, Karen Wang, who had kind of got the boot from the Liberals because
and
of some...
wanted to get back in.
Yes, because of some divisive and controversial comments she made about ethnicity and about Jagmeet Singh, and so she got the boot. Richard Lee was ushered in, I think, just back in January, right? So
yeah, in the midst of the campaign.
In the midst of the campaign, so not very long ago. So interesting to watch what kind of showing. I mean, he has some name recognition in the province as well. Obviously, interesting to see. I mean, I'm interested in the Liberals showing for a number of reasons. Obviously, BC we have all these discussions about resources and pipelines and the kind of impact that that will have on voters in BC. Okay, yeah. Why don't we go to Scott Davidson? That's the Conservative who just won in York Simcoe. He's in Sutton, Ontario. Let's take a listen into what he's saying.
With one T, keeping it simple. We kept it simple, Mom. That's good. We like that. So, friends, thank you to everyone that's come out tonight, and thanks to York Simcoe tonight. And York Simcoe includes a lot of communities, and a lot of communities I was around. That includes Port Bolster, Pefferlaw, Mount Albert, Sharon, Queensville, Newton Robinson, Bradford, Sutton, Island Grove. We can go on and on. And also, we have a great First Nations with the Chippewas of Georgina Island. Many of my friends are over on the First Nations, and big shout out to you guys tonight. I want to give a big shout out to, I've got a lot of friends in Prince Edward Island. I want to give a big shout out to them and in the province of Quebec tonight for supporting me. I really appreciate it. And I think this by-election for me, one of my main focuses was small business. Small business has lost its voice in Ottawa, and I just want to thank small business for coming out for me tonight. Because I know a lot of you guys were grinding it out 16 hours a day, and I know you came out for me today, and I really want to say thank you to small business. Right on, So I'll keep this as brief as I can. About 4 months ago, with support of many of you, we fought a nomination to carry the Conservative banner in York Simcoe. And I won that nomination, was very proud to carry the Conservative banner. And just over 6 weeks ago, along with the support of all of you, we started campaigning in this by-election that tested everyone's challenge. And it was a challenge. The weather was ugly. We were into trying to get signs in, and we had a hammer drill going, and I really got to thank, and you're all here tonight. We have candidates here that have come from Don Valley, and I appreciate it. Mr. Lee, and all the volunteers. There's so many names to list, and this whole thing couldn't be done without volunteers. And I gotta give a big shout out. Everyone worked oh so hard, and you know, a lot of people say that this riding, you know, it's a conservative stronghold, but you know what? The former MP Peter Van Loan and all the volunteers have always worked hard to keep this riding conservative, and we're going to continue to do that because there's no replacement for hard work. So just over 8 days ago, we were planning our final week. And that final week saw our leader, Andrew Scheer, in the riding, a week which we closed in on knocking on over 20,000 doors. And I'm so proud of the volunteers that helped us with that. I mean, getting door to door and talking to people was so important. Just over 10 hours ago, I joined many of you as we started the final push of getting out the vote. And we grinded it out. And today was a grind, especially up in the northern part of the riding. We were, it'd blow the hat right off your head out there today. So, over 20 minutes ago, Peter did. I was sitting out in the parking lot, and it looked convincing that we were going to be victorious tonight. And I just want to say that we all did this together in this campaign, and I'm really, really proud of that. And I really, really want to thank the voters, because we tried our best to reach out to them and get our message out, and I'm really proud that they came out to support a strong Conservative candidate, and thank you very much on that. Now, it might have been my name on the ballot, but together we kept this riding Tory blue, and together we sent a message to Justin Trudeau that his days are numbered as Prime Minister. And very important to me, standing on this side, is my beautiful wife, Suzanne House. And I have to thank so much for all her support. And on this side is my best buddy and my son, Graydon. And I know there's a bunch of you here as well, and I owe so much to all of you for your time, your financial donations, for your support, and again, most importantly, to all the voters tonight in York Simcoe, and that includes the urban and rural, because I know rural, I spent a lot of time in the rural, and rural is very important to me, and thank you so much for coming out on that. I also wanted to acknowledge my 8 fellow competitors that were on the ballot tonight. We did not agree on all the issues. I value the opportunity to debate the ideas and look forward to representing every voter in York Simcoe. And that is something that's very important to me. I want to be an MP for everyone. I am the type of guy that I want people to pick up the phone and have a conversation with. I'm the type of guy you want to set a meeting up, come and have a meeting. Pick up the phone and let's have some dialogue, because I think that is very important. For any of you that don't know me, please take the opportunity to come and meet with me and get to know me. It's very important, that connection, and that's the type of MP I want to be for everybody. Now, I have to tell you, this past weekend, I spent some time with our party leader, Andrew Scheer. He came into Sharon and over to Mount Albert with me. And I talked to Andrew on the phone. I'd never met him in person. And the guy is solid, okay? You'll see I'm the type of guy that'll call a spade, and I want to tell you, Andrew Scheer made me feel so comfortable. Him and I hit it off, and he cares so much about this great country we all call home, Canada. He was very engaged in talking about the riding. He had done his homework. He knew about the issues, environmental, with Lake Simcoe, and it's something we want to continue on the good works of our former MP, Peter Van Loan, to make sure Lake Simcoe is somewhere that we can all live, work, and play and enjoy, and have it clean for our grandkids and our children. So that's a priority, and I was so happy that Andrew Scheer reached out about that.
We're listening to Scott Davidson, the Conservative candidate, the now winner of the by-election in York Simcoe. Scott Davidson, who according to Bradford Today has an economics degree, lives in Georgina. He's a small business owner. So you heard him talk at the beginning of his speech there, his victory speech, about the importance of small business, his focus on small business. It appears that he owned a bar. He launched a company called Fish Crisp, which was a company producing a fish coating product that was sold in sporting good departments across North America. So kind of interesting history there, but lends itself to a lot of what we heard about the focus on small business. We are, of course, also waiting for the results in Burnaby South. That's the third by-election the only one we don't yet know who won. So Conservatives won in York Simcoe in Ontario, and the Liberals won in Quebec in Outremont, which is Tom Mulcair's old riding. What are some of the things, as I think we're waiting for Jagmeet Singh to talk, we might have a shot of the room there, but what are some of the things that, based on the results, there it is, there's the podium right there. We're waiting, as I said, for Jagmeet Singh. We still don't have a projection for that riding. But some interesting numbers in what's been reported so far.
If we still want to talk about the York Simcoe numbers, just that it was 51% of the vote for Scott Davidson at this stage, which is pretty much exactly where Peter Van Loan was in 2015 when they got 50% of the vote under him. The Liberals have dropped about 6 points in that riding, and the NDP about 2. And the People's Party, we were talking a lot about how much of an impact the People's Party would have on a riding like York Simcoe, just north of the GTA and just on the edge of where those Liberal gains were in 2015. Only 1.8% of the vote, so really not an impact there. It would not have made a difference. But it's interesting to see still that the Conservatives did not make a gain there. We were expecting that. In the riding of Leeds-Grenville, which had a by-election just at the end of last year, they made a gain of about 10 points.
Right.
And they didn't do that here, so it's an interesting number. But we are starting to see some of the numbers come in Burnaby South. We're still now we're at 11% of the votes counted. So they got 1,400 votes.
And where are we at?
And we can see that Singh is still ahead and is looking in a strong position. He's got 39% of the vote, 27% right now for Richard T. Lee, and Jay Shin of the Conservatives at 21%, and Laura Lynn Thompson of the People's Party at 11%. So I think that's a pretty good score for the NDP if they can hold on to it, because the NDP took 35% of the vote in Burnaby South in the last election, and the Green Party candidate had about 3% of the vote. There's no Green Party candidate here. Elizabeth May wanted to give Jagmeet Singh that leader's courtesy. So if a lot of those voters went over to the NDP, it seems like it could have happened. So we're seeing that Singh at this stage, we'll see what this holds. He's just now shy of 40%, just the numbers going up right now. But if he is able to...
That would be a good outcome.
That would be good because, I mean, it does show that he brought voters to the NDP, that he wasn't just putting up the same kind of results that the NDP would normally get in that riding, that he's actually giving the party a boost. And so they would need that right now. So right now... He's
been campaigning nonstop there.
Nonstop,
yeah.
Yeah, we haven't seen him in Ottawa
no, I was just
for
going to say,
weeks
yeah,
because
for
he's
a long
in Burnaby,
time,
So right now ahead by 13 points over Richard T. Lee of the Liberals. I think the New Democrats would be pretty satisfied with these results. But again, still only 15% of the vote counted.
I want to remind everybody who's watching us on Twitter and YouTube and Facebook, send your questions in, and we will get to as many of them as possible. Dylan Moser on Facebook asks, if Singh wins his election, will we see a surge in NDP support? And would that surge benefit the Conservatives or Liberals more? Good question.
Well, will we see a surge? Maybe. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, obviously, it would be a boost for the NDP to have a good news story. They haven't had one for a little while. Maybe Singh performs well when he's in the House. Maybe it gives the party a bit more credibility because Singh is not stacking up well against Scheer and Trudeau on questions related to who people want as Prime Minister. He's usually at somewhere around 5-6%, whereas Scheer would be at 24-25% and Trudeau 35% north of that.
Do you think that's like the unknown factor, or is that based on what they've seen? Or a mix? I don't know.
I don't know if it's an unknown factor because a lot of the polls that have been done shown that people know him about as well as they know Andrew Scheer. There's not a big difference between the two. And of the people who have an opinion, for Scheer, it's usually mixed. It's about the same amount of people who have a good opinion of him, who have a bad opinion. But for Singh, it's almost 2-to-1. People don't have a good opinion of him. So what they've seen so far, they haven't liked that much. So maybe being in the House will give him a bit of a boost. But if the NDP does get a boost, that would help the Conservatives. Because at 14%, which is where they are in the polls right now, the Conservatives would not think that they're in a good position to win an election. It's very rare when the NDP is that weak that the Conservatives are very competitive, because in a lot of those ridings and the GTA in the Greater Vancouver area, for example, if there's a weak NDP, the Liberals are probably winning some of these ridings.
Do you think it's a given, and I take that point definitely in the last election, but I started to wonder the other day, is it a given that those votes will go over to the Liberals? And I ask because might they just stay home? There are some kind of polarizing issues that the Liberals, for example, in buying the pipeline, have really alienated a lot of those voters that went over to them in the last election because they didn't feel they had a home in the NDP where they might traditionally go. And I'm wondering if this time, I don't know, I'm just raising the question, but if they if they say, oh, Jagmeet Singh's not a viable option for me, does that automatically mean they go to Justin Trudeau, or do they not vote?
Yeah, if they stay home, that's
I don't know.
almost as bad, I think, because then if voters who would support the Liberals don't go out and vote, but they don't go out and vote for the NDP, that means the NDP is not winning a Liberal seat, for example, right? But yeah, that is also one of those factors that it's not exactly that Liberals vote and New Democrats vote for one or the other party, right? There's a little bit of movement to other parties, the Greens, for example, although we're not, aside from Outremer, really getting that surprising third place finish.
Very exciting.
Yeah, it's not always a simple equation, but I think it's also not just of voters going in one direction or another, but a signal. When the NDP is weak, it's a signal for a lot of voters perhaps that the Liberals are good enough to vote for, that they're not pushing voters towards other parties because of that they see that the Liberals are weak. So when the NDP is weak, it almost is a signal that for voters who are on the center left, the Liberals are still palatable at least, rather than when there's a strong NDP, it's usually a sign that the Liberals are not doing very well.
Okay, why don't we take a look? So I'll recap what we're doing right now while you try and get your numbers back up there so you can give us the latest. The decision desk has projected that the Conservatives will have won in the by-election in York Simcoe. That's in Ontario, kind of on the edges of the GTA. The candidate there, Scott Davidson, a small business owner, he just delivered his victory speech. He thanked, of course, the previous MP, Peter Van Loan, cited the leader of the Conservative Party, Andrew Scheer, thanked him for campaigning with him over the past few days, spoke of how they got along well and seemed to mesh. He also, as I said, focused on small business. It seems to be that is his background. He replaces Peter Van Loan, who was there for in that riding for a number of years. Over in Quebec, in Outremer, that Tom Mulcair's old riding, the former leader of the NDP, he won the election back in 2007 in that riding. It had been a Liberal stronghold for decades, and the Liberals have stolen that riding back this time around. A pretty important riding for the Liberals, given how well they've been polling in Quebec. We were all sort of watching to see how well they would do in this riding, if those poll numbers would translate here, and perhaps if they can be a bigger indicator of what's to come in the federal election in October. And finally, of course, we are watching the big one in Burnaby South, watching to see what will happen with Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the federal NDP. He is running for a seat in the House of Commons. He's been leader of that party since October of 2017, which is kind of feels like a really long time ago.
Eternity ago,
yeah, eternity ago. But he hasn't had to say. I'm fascinated to see how he does. Should he win? It looks like at this point we don't know, obviously. But I'm interested to see how he performs in the House of Commons. I think it'll be. I just remember covering Tom Mulcair and Stephen Harper, and how much of a part of Tom Mulcair's reputation his performance in the House became. Again, that's a very Ottawa thing.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think my sisters are at home glued to QP every day, but it sort of did translate, because like you mentioned, when they went into the election, prior to the campaign, the NDP were polling very high, and he himself as a leader looked poised to do big things, and then a number of things happened in the campaign to change those fortunes.
Yeah, and I think it's not just about the performance in the House. I think because being on that stage, I think it does add credibility and makes you someone who seems like more of a legitimate option compared to the other two. And if you at least are at that baseline where people are taking you as seriously as they are the other ones, even if they don't particularly like you, or they're not sure if they're going to vote for the party, just to at least be in the running, to be considered on the same stage. Like Maxime Bernier and Elizabeth May have a seat in the House, and I think it helps them quite a bit. In the sense that it gives them more credibility than a leader of a party that does not have any seats, because you just want to be seen as someone who is a legitimate.
You want to be on par with
Yeah,
I mean, what we watch in the House of Commons is essentially a jockeying for power.
Yeah.
I mean, look what's going on right now with the SNC-Lavalin controversy. I mean, there is a back and forth every day that is reflective of some of the choices voters will have to make come election time. And so even though it is very inside Ottawa, it matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, and when you, but it's also in a way emblematic of the NDP, because when you watch QP, like as we do, the Conservatives are, Scheer asks his questions at the beginning, it's very focused, one issue, and then usually the issue carries through to the other question as well. You see the NDP, where they have a series of people getting up and asking questions that are often not as focused, not on one issue. In a way, it shows how lacking that leader there, who is maybe there to be the focal point of the criticisms, of the questions, is something that's happening with the NDP, where there just doesn't seem to be as much focus. And I think it's in part because they don't have a leader there every single day.
Well, and they've also been, as a result of that, and as a result of some of the internal struggles, they have faced questions day in and day out. Will your party survive this? How are you going to, head into the election? Your leader isn't here. Why isn't he here? What kind of, are there frictions within caucus? I mean, that is essentially the line of questioning that they've faced, and I'm sure they're not thrilled about that.
Yeah, and
but it's
hecklers
hard.
in the House, whenever they mention our leader, Jagmeet Singh, you can hear a chorus of Liberals.
Right.
Say who. They say who.
Natasha Kornak has a great question for us on Facebook. What do you think was the ballot box question in Burnaby? Was it the pipeline?
You know what? I don't know if it was the pipeline, but when you do see the numbers for the Liberals, right now we are starting to see a pretty good portion of the vote counted, 23% in Burnaby South. Liberals are at 26%, and in the last election, they got about 33.5%. So they're down 7 points in that riding, which isn't a very good sign for them. BC's pretty important for them, the Greater Vancouver area. There's some seats they'd like to pick up. So that might be a bit of a sign that they are taking a bit of a hit on that, because just based on the polls where they are in BC, you wouldn't expect as big of a drop as that. And when you see that Singh is at 39%, I think it is a combination of the pipeline issue, in the sense that he's the main anti-pipeline candidate on the ballot. Valentine Wu, who's running as an independent, was actually a Green Party candidate at the provincial level in 2017. The Greens decided not to run a candidate there. But I think for Singh, right now he's at 39%. He's got a 13-point lead over the Liberals, so he's been holding that. We haven't seen
not a lot of fluctuation.
Yeah, there hasn't been a lot of fluctuation. It usually is a sign that no matter where the votes are coming from, it's more or less what is happening across the riding. Because there are parts of the riding that have voted more Liberal. The northern part is where Richard Lee's seat had some overlap with the federal one, his provincial seat. So it's a good sign for Singh, and the number is a good number. I think that if they're at 39%, it shows that they've made a bit of a gain. And when you see the polls in BC and the polls nationwide for the NDP, you wouldn't expect them to make a gain. So that does seem to be a bit of a Singh bump, at least here.
The interesting question on what the ballot box question is. We had a number of reporters who were in Burnaby at various polling stations. I felt, based on their reporting, it seemed like the biggest issue was affordable housing. And that doesn't come as a huge shock, given what people in and around Vancouver, throughout BC, are facing when it comes to housing prices. You also see that mirrored, which might give us some indication of Singh's performance tonight, mirrored in a lot of the messaging from the NDP and Jagmeet Singh right from the start. I can remember when he basically declared that he would be running in that riding, one of his first messages out the gate was around affordable housing. And it's interesting because, and a bit of foreshadowing, I think, towards the federal election, because this is one of those policy issues. They've been criticized, the NDP, for not getting a solid grip on what exactly they are going to stand for. I would argue that affordable housing is an outlier to that criticism, that they have had a pretty strong message on that. The Liberals have talked a lot about affordable housing. They've committed some money. A lot of it is back-ended. And they've kind of provided a bit of an opening for the NDP to say, okay, what are you doing for not just affordable housing for those who can afford to buy homes, but those who have who are having trouble paying the rent and things like that. So that seemed to be a message that has resonated with voters, most especially out there. It'll be interesting to see if that permeates throughout the rest of the country.
And Jagmeet Singh would have some personal experience with the housing issue in Burnaby, because he was looking for a place.
Right.
And he was joking that he got I think he called it a Vancouver special. So a very expensive place that is not at all at the level that you would expect for the price point. So
right.
I think it is a very sensitive issue, and he would know that firsthand.
Rory Ditchburn on Twitter asks, if Singh wins tonight, how will that change the narrative around the federal NDP moving into the next election? And not just wins like this. I mean, we have to wait till we know for sure, but that kind of an outcome where you're able to build on previous support. Yeah,
and it's not a win by default at this stage. It's looking like a solid, respectable win for the NDP, more than they've gotten in recent elections. They did get 44% of the vote here in 2011, though That was obviously a
big
bit
year
of
for them.
a big year for them. You know, this is in line with where they would have been, for example, in 2008 or that kind of thing.
Right.
So it's still just, it's a creditable win. It's something that he can take. So I think it changes the narrative a bit, because the narrative on the NDP for a few months has just been about more or less failures to resonate among voters, failures to raise money. In by-elections, we've seen that the average result for the NDP has been a minus 6 points in every by-election. They've lost in every single one, except for Ottawa-Vanier, which was one by-election where they actually picked up some vote. But this is actually one of the first by-elections of this parliament where they're going to do better than where they were in 2015. So I think it starts to change a little bit of the narrative that Singh is someone who can deliver. He can actually get voters to vote for the NDP that didn't vote for them previously. So it gives them a chance, gives them to have some good news. And I was looking at the results in Outremont, 26% at this stage for Julio Sanchez. That's not a bad result for the NDP.
Yeah, you were saying 20
Yeah,
is
I
your
said
bar.
20 was my minimum bar. 25% was my
So
upper
26
bar
is
for
it.
when it starts to get decent. I think 26%
You got to
is
expect
actually
that
decent
both of those
result.
results are going to put a little bit of wind in the NDP's sails. And I think not even from a sort of larger party perspective, but even within caucus.
Yeah.
Like, you talk to a lot of MPs who were unsure of how this thing would go. I think in the last few weeks, they kind of solidified their expectation that Jagmeet Singh would win.
Mm-hmm.
It won't come as a surprise. I don't think they were as sure by how much or if there would be any gains. And I think they were also worried about Outremont. So you've got to expect this will have some effect on the caucus dynamic as well, which is not a bad thing for Jagmeet Singh, who will now be leading them in the House of Commons as well.
Yeah, I think for some New Democratic MPs in Quebec, they're not the kind of numbers that would make them confident that they will be re-elected. But if you're an Alexandre Bouleris, if you're a Ruth Ellen Brousseau, if you're Guy Caron, maybe you look at these numbers and say, like, okay, we dropped, but maybe I can still work with a drop this large and still eke out a win over some other, over a divided field. So for the NDP, they're still not good results. You can't sugarcoat that they're dropping almost 20 points in Outremont.
Right.
They lost Mulcair, that's a big deal. But still to get a solid second spot, twice as much as the third place candidate, which in this case is the Greens, again, a bit of a surprise. Not too bad, not as bad as it could have been. We saw some polls over the last couple of weeks, 8% for the NDP in Quebec. That would be a catastrophe for them, decimation, right. Lose every single seat, not even be in the running. So I think it's not a win. Julio Sanchez isn't going to be happy that she was defeated, but maybe not so bad. Maybe the narratives will change a little bit for the NDP.
That dude on YouTube, that's a direct quote, that's his name on YouTube, or hers, asks, how does the entry of PPC compare to other parties' first appearances in elections?
Well, when you think about where the Bloc Québécois started, 1990, Jules Duceppe was a candidate in Laurier-Sainte-Marie. He won that riding for the Bloc. That was the first ever time that Bloc ran as a candidate, and they won. Think about the Reform Party under Deborah Gray, 1989, in riding in Alberta. They won that riding. Not great results for the People's Party. I mean, if we're looking at the ones, okay, Vassy is now she's got to go for the Nationals, yeah, so she. Here's Phil Ling. He's a great producer here in the Bureau. So I'll take over for the next little while. So we were talking about the People's Party. As Vassy goes off, she'll be back. She'll be back. Don't worry. It won't just be me for too long. Yeah, and we're starting to get close to quite a number of votes counted in Burnaby South. So maybe I'll have to make a call. We'll have to wait and see. But the question was about the People's Party. So if we look at these results right now, it's 11% for Laura Lynn Thompson in Burnaby South. That's a good result, I would say, for a party like the People's Party, getting 11% in Burnaby South. But again, we don't know how much of that would be because of her own appeal. She has a base of supporters. She ran in a municipal office and had a decent amount of the vote there. She's pro-life. She was speaking out against the sexual education program in BC. So she had a particular voting base. I'm just not sure if it's a People's Party base. That's not exactly the kind of clientele that Maxime Bernier has been chasing. And I don't know if he can replicate it in other ridings. Because when you see with the other results, in Outremont, People's Party 1.8%. Not very good. As I'd mentioned earlier, you can sometimes see some candidates get that kind of score. We've seen the Christian Heritage Party, for example, finish ahead of the NDP in a Medicine Hat by-election earlier on in the session. And when you look also at York Simcoe, we were talking a lot about how much of an impact the People's Party would have on a GTA riding for the Conservatives. Only 1.8%. They finished behind the PC Party, not the Progressive Conservatives, the Progressive Canadian. Their leader, Dorian Baxter, I believe it's the leader. It was the leader at some point. I'm not sure if they're the leader now. I'd have to recheck my notes. But finishing behind them, finishing behind the Greens, those aren't strong results for Maxime Bernier. If he was looking at these results, I don't think he should be very pleased that he was scoring under 2% in Outremont, in his native province of Quebec, and in York Simcoe, a solid Conservative riding where voting for the People's Party was not going to cost the Conservatives the seat. But the result in 11% in Burnaby South, that's a sign that if Bernier can find these kinds of candidates who are maybe lightning rods for controversy, which also means lightning rods for attention, that he can get some good results there. But not a great night for the People's Party, I'd say, because a lot of that vote for Laura Lynn Thompson in Burnaby South might be more about Laura Lynn Thompson than it is about Maxime Bernier, though it did seem that Bernier was spending a bit more time in that riding than he was in the other two. So Todd Spurl on Facebook. And a reminder, you can send your questions in on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. You can mail them in. We'll answer them in a couple of weeks. Todd Spurl on Facebook. Outside of Alexandre Boulris, do you see the NDP winning any seats in Quebec? He says he doesn't. So let's look at the map. Let's use this map since it's sitting right here. Let's look at the map in Quebec right now. So at the end of the last election, where things were, the NDP won 16 seats in Quebec. So you can see that they won a few this is Romeo Saganash's riding, Christine Moore, and a couple in the east. But it was largely in the southern portion of the province where the NDP held on to its seats. So a couple on the island of Montreal and Longueuil, in central Quebec and Salaberry. A problem for the NDP is that a lot of these candidates aren't running again. Anne-Min Thuquac is not running. She's in Salaberry-sur-Roi. Hochelaga on the island of Montreal, where Marjolaine Boutin-Sweet, she's not running. Alain Laverdière, who won the riding of Laurier-Sainte-Marie from Jules Duceppe, she's not running again. These are going to be hard to win. If you're the NDP right now, you're looking at a riding like Boulris on the island of Montreal, Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie, which is just be right up here. That's a pretty solid progressive riding. It voted very strongly for the Quebec Solidaire in the provincial election. And you might also be looking at a riding like Ruth Ellen Brousseau, who's in Berthier-Masquinongé, just right here. She is the candidate who's infamously in Las Vegas in the 2011 federal election and didn't speak much French. She learned French. She became a really good constituency MP, and there's now she was actually one of the ones who was able to hold her vote in 2015, unlike a lot of NDP candidates. So when we're looking at what happened in Outremont, this was a riding that Tom Mulcair won with about 44% of the vote in 2015. He had won it by huge margin in 2011. They're dropping about, this stage we're looking at the numbers, they've dropped about 20 points, 19, 18 points. The NDP should be able to get 15% of the vote on a bad day in Outremont. So they're doing better than that, but this is a big gap. Losing almost 20 points in a riding, that would cost them every single seat in the province if they did that on election night. Now, a lot of that vote lost would be Tom Mulcair vote, and not just because of the NDP not doing very well in the polls lately, but if it was just a Tom Mulcair vote, you'd still probably expect them to be somewhere around the 35%. So not a strong showing for the NDP in Outremont, but enough that they can maybe think that people like Alexandre Boulris in Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie and Guy Caron in Rimouski and Ruth Ellen Brousseau in Berthier-Masquinongé, that maybe they would have a chance to hold on. Tiani Wang on YouTube, how competitive would the Green Party be in the next general election? This is one of the interesting questions because we've seen the Greens do really well in a series of provincial elections. They won a seat in Guelph in Ontario. They won 3 seats in New Brunswick. They hold 3 seats in British Columbia at the provincial level. They hold 2 seats in PEI and are actually in a neck-and-neck race with the Liberals there in what's expected to be a spring election. So keep an eye on that. If the Greens win in PEI and form a government at the provincial level, that's suddenly going to be a bit of a shift in the narrative, a little bit like when the NDP won in Alberta in 2015, which is what actually propelled Tom Mulcair to the top of the polls there. So the results that we're seeing so far, if we'll take a look at the screen there for where the NDP, for the Greens are. They didn't run a candidate in Burnaby South. This is probably helping Singh, who right now has a 12-point lead over Richard T. Lee with about just over a third of the vote counted. So good showing for Jagmeet Singh there. And the fact that the Greens aren't running a candidate probably helped. It's probably worth a couple points, but it doesn't look like he actually needed it. They probably would have won anyway. York Simcoe, not a good result for the Greens, 2.8% right now, generally where they are in that kind of riding, so nothing surprising there. But Outremeront is the one that's really kind of shocking, because you have Rachel Bendayan, who's now projected to be the next MP. Before I talk about the Greens, let's just look at that 13% for the Greens. But we do have a projection right now in Burnaby South. CBC News is ready to project that Jagmeet Singh will be the winner in the by-election in Burnaby South. Jagmeet Singh, who is the leader of the NDP, who became the leader in October 2017, did not have a seat in the House of Commons. He was a former Ontario MPP who made the jump to federal politics. He will be going to Ottawa, coming to Ottawa here, as the next MP for Burnaby South. And I think this will silence some of the critics that he's had of his leadership. The party has not been doing very well in the polls, hasn't been doing very well in financing. About a quarter of its caucus is not running for re-election. They decided not to re-offer in 2019 in October. But good news for Jagmeet Singh. He wanted to get a seat in the House. He targeted Burnaby South when Kennedy Stewart decided to step down as the MP for Burnaby South and run for the mayor's office in Vancouver. And CBC News is now projecting that he will be the next MP for Burnaby South. So let's just take a look at those results for him in the riding. So we got about 38% of the votes now counted. Not a huge amount of turnout, but we still got to wait and see where things end up by the end of the night. It's always hard to estimate turnout as the votes are coming in. 39%, 38.8% for Jagmeet Singh at this stage. A pretty healthy, nearly 13-point lead over Richard T. Lee of the Liberals, a former BC Liberal MLA from the area. Jay Shin in a third place at 22%. And Laura Lynn Thompson of the People's Party in a pretty strong fourth place with 11%. But for Jagmeet Singh, strong result for him, 38.8% of the vote. That is better than what Kennedy Stewart got in 2015. He took 35.1% in a squeaker of a win, 547 votes over the Liberal candidate there. Jagmeet Singh right now is already 800 votes ahead of Richard T. Lee, so it looks like his margin of victory will certainly be a lot wider than what Kennedy Stewart won in 2015. So Jagmeet Singh going to be the next MP for Burnaby South, going to have a seat in the House of Commons. This is what he wanted. When he first took over the leadership of the NDP, it was said that he didn't feel like he needed a seat. He was comfortable not having a seat. You can see, I don't know if you saw Vassy was running. She missed the projection, but that was me who got to project. But yeah, good news for Jagmeet Singh. Vassy, you missed the big news. You missed it. Jagmeet Singh is winning. He's projected to be the next MP in Burnaby South.
I got to break it elsewhere, but not here.
Yeah, so you'll be able to interview him in studio after interviewing him at a distance in Burnaby. But a good result for the NDP, and I think they're going to be pretty happy that not only did he win, but he increased his share of the vote over 2015. Won pretty handily. Liberals, not a strong showing there for them, down about 7 points from the last election. So Jagmeet Singh, we're going to be waiting for him to give a speech, and we are going to take that.
Yes, we are.
So we're just waiting for that to happen.
Yeah.
And look at that, it's 11 o'clock, just after 11 o'clock. We've still got lots of time.
Yeah, lots of time.
Lots
so
of time.
Let's recap. The newest news, the projection is from the decision desk that Jagmeet Singh has taken the by-election in Burnaby South. It feels like just a few months ago we were all saying, will he, won't he? Pretty decisive victory, 38.9% of the vote with how many polls reporting?
We're now up to 80 of 196, so just under 41%. So it's a good chunk of the vote.
And then we've got over in Ontario, in York Simcoe, the Conservative candidate there, Scott Davidson, projected to win. And in Outremeront, the Liberal candidate, Rachel Bendayan, thank you, has been projected to win there. So kind of not a shocker
No.
in each of those ridings. But I think the big thing we were all watching for was the NDP, right? And Jagmeet Singh, what kind of performance would he have? And like you said, able to build on the support that the party had in the last election. I imagine it's a pretty excited NDP and probably relieved and probably not a disappointed Liberal Party.
Probably not.
Not going to lie, right?
Yeah,
This was what they're going on the assumption that they will perform better if Jagmeet Singh is leader. Because they don't anticipate, many of them, I shouldn't speak for all of them, but the ones whom I've spoken with, don't anticipate that his performance necessarily will aid him.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a, Pandora's box. You don't know if he would have stepped down, what would have come out of that. Maybe a worse leader, maybe a better one.
Yeah. Well, look at the experience in Ontario, right?
Yeah, well, that's exactly
It doesn't mean
right.
the end of anything.
No.
In fact,
no.
you can go on to become premier with a large mandate.
Yeah, just after a couple months later, after going in. So Jagmeet Singh, I think for him, he's got to be pretty relieved about this because he put a lot on the line. I think, you said how we were wondering at first whether he would win. And I think if a by-election had been held in the fall, I'm not sure if he would have won at that stage. I think the fact that he knocked on so many doors, clearly put a big effort into there, he moved to the riding, I think it was enough for voters to say, okay, let's give him a chance.
I mean, even when he decided to run, if you think back to when he decided to run in that riding, there were tons of questions like, really? You're going to run in Burnaby South? You're from the 905 region. That's what he represented. That's the area he represented as a provincial politician in the Ontario legislature. Nobody felt like he had much experience there. He didn't understand the local issues. In fact, I think he ended up being the only candidate who actually lives in the riding,
That's right? The only one who was able to
Ironically.
vote. Eligible to vote.
Yeah, and we saw him doing that. And so, as I said before, he seemed to really pick up on some of the big issues out there, especially, I would say, affordable housing, based on what I heard. I remember him talking about that right from the beginning. And we heard from a lot of our reporters out there, a number of people who were at the polls voting, talking about those types of issues. It also seemed to be actually a pretty divisive campaign. There were a lot of voters who were speaking to our reporters were talking about some of the nasty names. We know the Liberal candidate, for example, made some comments that she ended up getting the boot for about Jagmeet Singh's ethnicity. Some of the debates were particularly rambunctious. Yeah, so that might have played into how people ended up voting as well.
Yeah, I think so, and I think his team says that he knocked on 30,000 doors. So a lot of the people who did vote certainly are not going to reach 30,000 votes. I don't think we're only at 6,800 counted, and we got about half, just about a 43% counted. But they knocked on a lot of doors. So if you weren't sure about Jagmeet Singh, you didn't believe that he was someone who was serious for the job, that he wasn't from the riding. If he came to your door a couple times, maybe that's enough to change. He is a charming person in person. I think that kind of politics is really where he's got his strengths.
And we're just looking at a shot now of Jagmeet Singh's headquarters. We're awaiting his arrival. Once again, the CBC is projecting that Mr. Singh has won the Burnaby South by-election. He's at about 38.5% with more than 80 polls reporting now, or?
Yeah, we got 85, so 43%, and he's winning. He's beating Richard T. Lee by just about 12 or 11 points.
Any indicators on turnout at this point? All I've been hearing is kind of low.
It doesn't look like it's going to be very high because right now it's at 9% with 43% counted, so we should end up somewhere north of 20. But as I said, it's hard to estimate early on because also if you weren't on the list but you showed up, you get counted. So the Elections Canada would still be finalizing the amount of people who actually are eligible to vote in the riding. So we won't know the final turnout numbers. Those are usually the things that are hard to know before the end of the night. And often also some of the polling boxes that are counted are the biggest ones are counted at the end. So suddenly you get a big rush of votes. But certainly we didn't see high turnout in the advance poll in any of them. And there was terrible weather in the York-Simcoe area today, so the turnout there we're expecting to be pretty low. But you know what? It's about who goes out and votes. And you got to get your people out, and it looks like the NDP was successful doing that.
Connor McIntyre on YouTube asks, it was talked about earlier that Mulcair would get a little boost because he was the leader. How much of that do you think is the case for Jagmeet Singh?
Well, I think it's fair to say that he is beating Kennedy Stewart's numbers by about 3 points right now. But the NDP has dropped support in BC. So you would have expected, all else being equal, that the NDP might have ended up somewhere around 30% or something like that. But instead, he's given them a bit of a boost. So I think it's fair to give him the leadership boost of 5 points or something like that. I think he can take credit for a decent amount of this, because when you look at how Julia Sanchez is doing in Outremont, where she dropped 20 points-ish after Mulcair's gone, you look at their results in York Simcoe, where I believe the last I checked that they were a little bit further down from where they were in 2015, that the NDP is not performing well in these other by-elections, but performing well in Burnaby South. So it makes for a bit of a muddled narrative, because you'll have these results in Outremont, not good. Result in York Simcoe wasn't ever going to be good, because it's not their kind of riding, but still nothing to write home about. But then a strong result and a pretty good result for the NDP to pick up support when everywhere else they seem to be dropping.
And I feel like maybe muddled if you get into the weeds, but compared to
that's what I do.
I know you do, but I just take a broad strokes TV reporter type of give it to me in 2 minutes, and I think the expectation there was so much speculation and opining on how bad could the NDP do. Like, let's be realistic, right? That was, I know they weren't happy with that, and that was sort of the narrative. Oh my God, how low can their fundraising go? How low can their poll numbers go? That if you look at it like a comparative value of how they performed tonight versus what perhaps the low point of the expectations about their performance would be, I feel like they're breathing a sigh of relief.
Yeah, I think so.
Even though they dropped in Outremont, for example, I mean, we were saying, what if they go below 15,
20,
or 20,
15, or finish
20 is
fourth.
the bottom, or finish fourth, and they didn't do that. No. They weren't wiped off the map. Is that cause for celebration?
It's a silver lining.
Probably not.
Really looking for one for the NDP, and they are looking for them lately.
But they are looking for it. That's the point.
That's
right?
a silver lining. I'll give them that. The fact that they are still if you're a voter on the island of Montreal right now, looks like you're deciding to vote either Liberal or NDP. The NDP will take that. It means people aren't voting for the Bloc, they're not voting for the Conservatives or the Greens, that in these urban areas where they have their seats, that the NDP is still the alternative. So if things get better for them over the next few months, then that means they're back in the running in some of these ridings.
Right. Okay, let me take another question. Seamus Finnerty on Facebook. Éric and Vassy, do you think that the People's Choice Party so far has left enough of a statement, given the number of votes that have been cast, to make the Conservative Party leery about the upcoming federal election? Given, and Seamus says that most of the people's votes are likely to come from the Conservative base.
Yeah, I would say no. If I'm Andrew Scheer, sorry about that. If I'm Andrew Scheer, I'm pretty relieved by these results, because you can look at the ones in Outremont where they only have less than 2% of the vote. You look at the results in York Simcoe, less than 2%. That's 2% they're going to lose to an independent candidate. They can lose to the Christian Heritage Party in some areas, and that's not a worry for them. If 2% is not going to cost them more than a handful of seats, if that's what Bernier is able to do everywhere. And the one in Burnaby South, where they're at about 11% for Laura Lynn Thompson, at 11.3%, I think the Conservatives can say, this was particular to this particular riding, this candidate, and the issues that she was pushing, and so it's not emblematic of the People's Party elsewhere. So
what if they can get other candidates like the one in Burnaby South? If they can get people who have sort of a name, somewhat of a name, who have somewhat of a voter base because they've run in other types of elections, or I don't know. I mean, that's difficult to do in over 300 ridings. It was kind of astonishing that they had 3 candidates in these by-elections, but it maybe shows that you need that type of candidate, that you need some recognition on the candidate level. And your party alone isn't going to get that.
Well, when we think about the kind of attention that Maxime Bernier has gotten, it's largely when he's done something a bit unconventional, let's just say that way. Or you had him recently on Power and Politics discussing blackface of all things.
Yeah. We don't need to revisit that.
Exactly, but it's just that's what's been getting him a lot of attention. And for Laura Lynn Thompson, it's the same kind of playbook, right? It's taking positions that get a lot of attention, that engage a lot of people, either because it enrages them or it really, finally someone's talking about these issues, that kind of thing. And then in the other 2 ridings where they had 2 candidates who seemed to be normal candidates. One was a prosecutor, one was a former member of the armed forces.
Maybe not normal, but less polarizing.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Like the kind of candidates that would not be
would not
stand
run for
out.
the Conservatives.
They could run for and the fact that they didn't attract any significant votes suggests that in a lot of these ridings, the People's Party needs someone who is going to really galvanize those supporters who feel that the other parties aren't representing them and not pushing the kinds of issues that they care about. That if they just have normal candidates who are just your generic, I'm a People's Party candidate and I stand for the platform, that's it, that might not be enough to really get people enthusiastic to go out and vote for Maxime Bernier.
I mean, it's a new party, though, regardless of where they fall on the spectrum or whatever. I mean, the idea of this party was just formed in the fall. So no matter, I mean, I can't imagine any other new party that would, just on the sheer recognition of their name, be able to garner a ton of votes.
Yeah, but
regardless
you
of
look
their
at
position.
Burnaby South, Terry Grimwood, who's an independent candidate, has 1.2% of the vote.
Yeah.
Which is similar to what's happening in the other ones. In York Simcoe, you have William Barrett. He's got 0.4. That's not very high. But if you look at, for example, in York Simcoe, you have Robert Gertz, who's 1.8%. He's finished behind the Greens, but he's also finished behind the Progressive Canadian Party, which is, I'll be honest, a lot of people voting for this party probably believe it's the Progressive Conservative Party, and they're voting for a PC candidate, which is why their name is registered here as PC Party. This was on purpose. When the merger happened, this party was created, and they weren't able to take the name because it was too similar to the other parties that exist. So this is their play. This is what they want. They want to be the old PC Party. But it just shows you that in a by-election, turnout's low, people go to the ballot box, they'll cast their ballots in, you can get at 1% of the vote if you're an independent, if you're running for a minor party. So I'm actually surprised that the results are this low for Maxime Bernier in these other two ridings. I thought that a 3-4% would have been a low bar for him to meet. 1.8, 1.7%. Like I said, you're an independent candidate with a name that sounds familiar, you can get at least that amount of the vote.
Marlo Turner-Ritchie on Facebook asks, this is such a great question, to what extent, and I know you look at this all the time, do by-election results translate into general election wins?
They do more than people think, because
Another reason to watch.
Exactly.
Tonight.
I like by-election results. I always pore over them, and people say they don't matter, but they actually do. If you look at the track record, when a party makes gains in a riding, in a by-election, they tend to, by a margin of 2 to 1 about, make gains in the next election. They make gains either nationwide or provincially. And prime ministers who have a winning record, they tend to be re-elected more than prime ministers who have a losing record in by-elections. And Justin Trudeau now, his record is actually one of the better ones, compared to other prime ministers. The Liberals have picked up 3 ridings in this session. Which is not something you see very often. Stephen Harper did it in one of his terms, and one of those ridings was Bill Casey's at the time. He had stepped down, so he was a PCer, and then he was an independent, and the Conservatives won it back. So that's the last time you find a Prime Minister win 3 by-elections in one Parliament. You have to go back to Wilfrid Laurier to find one who did that again. So it's not, it's unusual.
Stuff in your head.
It's unusual for prime ministers to win in by-elections. It's not that in British Columbia, for example, provincially, the record of governments is horrifying.
Yes,
they lose almost everyone.
Yeah.
But in federal elections, it's incumbents win as often as they lose. Like it's not a particular strong side. But anyway, yes, they're not nothing. They do actually tell you something. You want to win.
Doesn't suck to win.
Bottom
line. Blake Shador on Facebook asks, and I apologize if I mispronounced that name, what might the strong showing for the NDP in BC and Quebec, along with corresponding weak results for the PPC in Ontario and Quebec, indicate about overall Liberal fortunes in October?
Well, in BC, I think for the People's Party, the Liberals wanted to see something a bit better. So I don't think they're happy with these results. For the NDP, in BC, these are good results for them, although they're starting to come down a little bit now at 37.7% for Jagmeet Singh, but still better than what Kennedy Stewart did. I don't think the Liberals would see these results and be particularly happy, not just with Singh's number, but the fact that Richard T. Lee got 26%, which is not a terrific result for the Liberals in that riding.
In the riding, but I feel like countrywide, they're like, okay, Jagmeet Singh.
Yeah, maybe.
They they're not crushed.
No, I don't think so. But the numbers in Quebec.
The riding, you're right.
Yeah, they're only strong compared to expectations for the NDP, right? They didn't.
Yes.
They still lost almost 20 points in the seat. It's not good. So if you're the Liberals looking at the results in Quebec, I think you're thinking that you're probably going to be able to win the extra 15 seats in the province, picking up a lot of the seats at the expense of the NDP.
How important is that?
So important for them because they're writing off seats in Atlantic Canada, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia. They're writing off seats in the GTA that they didn't expect to win in 2015. So they know they're going to be losing 10, 20, 30 seats. Yeah. They have a 15-seat cushion. So if they lose 30 seats nationwide and pick up 15 in Quebec, then it evens out and they can still get a majority. So that's sort of the calculation there. That if they can win a dozen seats or more in Quebec, it might be enough to still get a majority government despite losses elsewhere.
And it's so interesting because a lot of the stuff we're talking about on a daily basis here that might have an impact on their electoral fortunes across the country, I'm thinking, for example, specifically of the SNC-Lavalin controversy, plays so differently in Quebec. Even the fight over the carbon tax and a lot of provinces banding together who don't want it, who feel like it's being imposed. Again, Quebec is a very unique situation, and the actions of the federal government are perceived much differently there on big controversial issues like the two I just mentioned. And so even though we might be saying, wow, how hard of a hit might they take on this SNC? Imagine Jody Wilson-Raybould comes out in 2 days and says very incriminating things. It might still not impact them to the same degree, or if at all, in at least comparatively speaking to the rest of the country in Quebec.
Yeah, they've picked up about almost 10 points in Outremont. And this is just in the wake of the SNC-Lavalin affair, which has been just unfolding in these last few weeks. If you've at all paid attention to politics in the last couple weeks, that's all you've heard. It was like today we were only talking about these by-elections. Before that, it was just SNC-Lavalin. So the fact that they were still able to pull that amount of vote in Quebec, I think would suggest that, yeah, they don't feel it's going to hurt them that much there, and it might actually help them. Because for a lot of voters in Quebec, they might look at this, they see the provincial government, which is popular government right now, saying, save this company, it shouldn't be allowed to go under. And the Liberals, you're already hearing their messaging. It's no longer about who said what, it's that they are standing up for jobs and the economy and this kind of thing. So they're already knowing that this will play well for them in Quebec. And I guess the long-term calculation is that it might play well for them elsewhere as well if it just becomes an issue about jobs, because they know that the economy is the top issue there.
If it becomes that, I don't know.
That's the thing. If it becomes, if people feel like the Prime Minister didn't act correctly, we saw some polling already that suggests that there's few Canadians who feel like he did act correctly. There's a lot who are still on the fence. If a lot of those people reach the conclusion that what the Prime Minister did was not correct, was not good, then they might lose some of those people who went over them, who voted for the Conservatives in the previous election, voted for the NDP in 2011, and went to the Liberals, and maybe they don't stick with the party, and they go back to one of the other ones, or they stay home.
I want to remind everybody that we are taking your questions on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, so please send them in. We're also waiting right now. We'll take a shot inside the room. This is where Jagmeet Singh is going to give his victory speech any moment. We are waiting for that right now. The CBC has projected that Jagmeet Singh has won or will win the Burnaby South by-election. Just to remind everyone who may be tuning in for the first time, the Liberals, CBC is projecting that the Liberals will win the by-election in Outremont, Tom Mulcair's old riding, former NDP leader, and that the Conservatives, Scott Davidson, will win the riding of York Simcoe, quite handily taking over for Peter Van Loan, a former Conservative MP who was there for a number of years. So a reminder, send in your questions. I'll read another one here. Colton Newton on YouTube. Does this win in Burnaby South say anything about provincial NDP support?
I don't know. I wouldn't say so. I think it's a bit too hard to translate the two, and because of the way that I think Singh might be on his way out soon, so we might have to take his speech. We'll see once he emerges.
We can pull that up and then just watch that and talk over it.
Yeah, but the BC NDP would be expected to do much better than this in this kind of riding because the scene is so different. But we saw that the NDP was able to...
They did have a by-election.
The BC NDP held on to the Nanaimo by-election, which meant that their government was able to hold on.
And there he is there, man of the hour.
He seems pretty happy with his result.
Yes. We can take a listen in, actually. You guys want to boost the audio there? you're just joining now, we're watching the victory party for Jagmeet Singh. The CBC has projected that Mr. Singh will win the by-election in Burnaby South. Mr. Singh has been the leader of the NDP since October of 2017. This will be his foray into the House of Commons here in Ottawa, something that he's been fielding questions on since basically the day he became leader. He initially said that he wanted to connect with people across the country. He didn't think that getting the seat in Ottawa was important. Obviously now he will be here in Ottawa shortly. Taking a seat in the House of Commons. We're awaiting his victory speech as we watch this. And Éric, some results, how many polls do we have reporting now?
We're now up to quite a bit now. We're up to just over 2/3 have been counted now. So we're up to 12,000 votes, just over 12,000 votes that are now in the system. And Jagmeet Singh, 38% of the vote, beating Richard T. Lee by a margin of 12 points. This was a riding that was decided by just 547 votes in 2015. And right now, Singh is winning by a margin of about 1,500 votes. So he's, and that's on lower turnout. So he's clearly improved upon Kennedy Stewart's performance in the 2015 election. And I think that he can take credit for a good amount of this gain that the party is making in this seat in terms of compared to where it was in 2015. There's no Green Party candidate here, which might have helped boost him a little bit, but I think that he can take credit for a lot of these extra votes that the NDP is getting in the ballot box tonight.
And there he is taking the stage. As I said, we are expecting him to speak any moment now. We don't know the turnout, obviously final turnout numbers, but we are seeing some initial ones in other ridings, and it looks pretty low. New York Simcoe, nearly 80% of the polls reporting turnout is only about 14.52%.
Yeah, these are pretty low turnouts across the board. We'll see what the final counts are, but
because everyone stayed home to wait to watch this.
Yeah,
So
yeah, you weren't supposed to do that. You were supposed to go out and vote, then come watch. But turnout in by-elections usually somewhere around 35%. That's usually where it ends up on average. We'll see if we beat that number in any of these. We're not up to that level yet. But again, still
it'll be interesting to see, especially in this riding, because as you mentioned, there has been voracious campaigning efforts on the part of Jagmeet Singh and the NDP there. We haven't seen him outside of Burnaby in weeks.
And it was a race of national significance, national attention,
Right.
unlike the other two.
Very true.
Much less coverage nationwide than this one.
And there he is with Don Davies, and I believe Jenny Kwan is the original person who introduced him. She's currently the immigration critic for the NDP. Trying to see if I see any other NDP MPs out there. A lot of talk among caucus members over the past few months about what the outcome of this race will be. And I said earlier, over the past few weeks, it appeared from the people I was speaking to that they had sort of solidified their anticipation that he would win. They were not sure by how much and how solid a win it would be. But they know they needed that to happen.
Yeah, and I don't think that they would have even expected they'd be winning by 12, 13 points. And here's
Here we go. Let's take a listen.
This is incredible. Look at all of you. This is amazing. Thank you so much. My friends, it's a new day. It's a new day. Before I go any further, I want to acknowledge that we are gathered here to live, to play, to work on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh. To Burnaby South. Thank you. To Burnaby South, thank you for trusting me to be your Member of Parliament. Thank you. I want to promise you something. I will be your champion. I will be your champion. I will take each and every one of you with me to Ottawa, where I'll fight for you in the House of Commons. To everyone in this room, There's so many of you who poured your hearts and soul into the campaign. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. To everyone who knocked on a door, to everyone who made a phone call, to everyone who made a donation, thank you, thank you, thank you. To my incredible campaign team, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You know, there's so many people I want to name. I've got to shout out, especially my incredible campaign manager, Amber Keane. Amber. Thank you. Thank you, Amber. Thank you for building the type of culture we believe in, a culture of positivity, a culture of joyful struggle in the office. Thank you. My family's here with me today. I want to shout out my mom and dad. They're in the crowd. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. My brother, Grenier Singh. And of course, my wife, my life partner, Grenier. You know, your love and support means so much to me. I literally would not be able to do any of the things that I've been able to do without all of your love and support, so thank you. I want to also acknowledge the other candidates in the race. They fought a hard campaign, and I want to thank them for their very important contribution to the democratic process, so I thank them. There were people across the country that helped out in so many ways. I want to thank every one of them who helped out. I'm humbled for your support for our party. I'm humbled by your belief in me. Thank you to everyone that helped out. Friends, we made history today. We made history today. You know, when I was growing up as a kid, I could have never imagined someone like me ever running to be Prime Minister. Well, guess what? We just told a lot of kids out there that yes, you can. Yes, you can. And I know that carries a lot of responsibility. And I understand that responsibility. And I want you to know that when I take my seat in the House of Commons, I will work hard to make you all very proud. Yes, I will. I also want to take a moment to thank our amazing candidates in the other by-elections. We had Julia Sanchez in Outremont, Jessa McLean in York Simcoe. They fought hard campaigns. They fought for the action that people need now in their lives, and they did us all very proud, and we're very, very proud of all their work. En 2011, Jack Layton a réussi à réunir sur le même bannier des voix progressistes du Québec et du reste du Canada. Ce rassemblement était essentiel pour bâtir une meilleure société. Comme chef, je tiens à vous dire
Singh was
ceci.
just saying that
Je
Jack
m'engage
Layton joined together progressives across Quebec in 2011,
avec les Québécois et Québécoises,
and he says he wants to renew
le rêve de Jack Layton.
connections with Quebec to
Et à cause de
realize
the
dreams of Jack Layton.
Québec la semaine prochaine.
He will be in Quebec next week.
Pour renouer avec les Québécois et Québécoises et pour leur offrir un plan
We'll have a plan to
pour le Québec,
reconnect with Quebecers
la condition de chacun de nous.
and re-elect his incumbents.
We are the champions for Quebecers. New Democrats are the champions for Canadians. We will continue to do that work. There's so many people out there. There's so many people out there that count on us. They need us. And so I know people have worked really hard over these past couple weeks. I know it's been a long slog, but I hope you've got more left in the tank. I hope you do. Because we just have 8 more months. We have 8 more months to let the people know that they can choose a government that stands up for people, not for corporations, that doesn't give handouts to SNC-Lavalin, but stands up for everyday Canadians. My friends, we have 8 more months to show people that there is a better choice for Canadians, that people can vote for those who are on their side. We are on the side of people. We're going to fight for people. My friends, I want to talk to you a little bit about what's going on in Canada. We live in an incredible country. It's a beautiful country filled with amazing people, but far too many of those people are falling behind. Many of them are struggling. Many of the people around us are finding it harder and harder to make ends meet. I've had a chance to meet the people across this country. I'm touring across here in Burnaby South and across Canada. Canada is filled with proud people. People that work hard to make a living for their families, to support their families. But they're working hard and feeling like they're falling further and further behind. And they're starting to feel a lot of fear and uncertainty and worry. And if they're worried about themselves, they're even more worried about their kids and what their kids are going to have in terms of a future. Now, some people are going to use that fear and already are using that fear and that uncertainty to blame those, not the ones that are responsible, but they're using that fear and uncertainty to point at your neighbors. They're using that fear and uncertainty to point at the people that you work with, the people you live with, the people in your communities. Now, people are afraid and uncertain for a reason. The reason is many of the basic things that we count on, the basic things that we need in life are no longer there. Things like healthcare that actually covers everyone, that covers us all. The ability to have a job that actually pays enough to build a good life. The ability to actually afford a home. To have clean air and water. To know that your kids can actually realize their dreams. Now, these basic things didn't just disappear. This didn't happen by accident. This was a concerted decision made by consecutive liberal and conservative governments. These liberal and conservative governments chose to strip away the basic things that we count on. They are responsible. They are the ones we need to point at, and they've been getting away for it. But my friends, not for long. Not for long. So I get it. People gave Mr. Trudeau, gave Justin Trudeau a chance. They thought maybe he would solve some of the problems, some of the mess that the Conservatives made. People said, okay, we'll give him a shot. Let's see what he's doing. Let's see if he's actually going to solve some of those problems. But the reality is he doing it?
No! He's making a bigger mess.
He's not doing it. He's making a bigger mess. He's not doing it. Instead, what is he doing? He is helping his well-connected corporate friends at SNC-Lavalin try to get off the hook. He continues to subsidize with billions and billions of our dollars oil and gas. He's putting pharmaceutical industry profits ahead of everyday Canadians who are struggling with the rising cost of medication. People should be angry at that. Angry at governments in Ottawa that continue to develop a system that puts more and more wealth in fewer and fewer hands. So what's the answer, though? What's the answer? Well, true. But my mom always taught me, my mom's here, she can tell you this is true. My mom always taught me that we're all connected with one another, that we've got a connection that we all share. And she taught me that if people around us are struggling, then we're also struggling. If people are hurting around us, we're also hurting. And she taught me if we lift up the people around us, we all rise. We all rise. Yes, we do. So being connected, coming together, that's how we solve this. But conservatives, that's not what they believe in. They believe that we're all separate. They believe that each one of us has to go it alone. They believe that each one of us is responsible to deal with the major problems that we're faced with as a society. And that's why Andrew Scheer is proposing the same old approach, the same old way that got us here in the first place. We know what his old way is. His old way is going to be to cut and to privatize the essential services that families need. He's going to drive up fears. He's going to continue to divide us. Now, I met a young kid, 10 years old. Take this in. There's a kid who's 10 years old, and he has a chronic, long-term illness. And this young kid with this illness told me about the medication and the injections and all the work he's got to go through just to stay alive. And he told me, I'm not worried about my illness. I'm not worried about the injections or the medication. I am worried about how much it costs my parents. He's worried that he's a burden to his family. This 10-year-old kid feels like he's a burden to his family. Now, the old way is not going to help out that kid. It's not going to help out his family. It's not going to make him feel like less of a burden. In fact, the old way of doing things hurts families. It hurts people. The old way of doing things, the old approach hurts the mom who works here in Burnaby South but has to commute 2 hours a day because she can't afford to live here. The old way hurts the new graduate who graduates, has some opportunities, but is afraid to start a family, delays starting a family because they're drowning in student debt. The old way hurts people who spend their whole life working for a corporation, working for a job, dedicated to a job, only to see the corporation walk away and steal their pensions. The Conservatives and Liberals have rigged a system that works for the powerful, the wealthy, and the well-connected, not for everyday Canadians.
Time's up.
Time's up. It doesn't have to be this way. We can fix it, and we will fix it. We will fix it. We can make different choices and get better results. We can make life easier for people, not easier for corporations to take advantage of us. We can actually take care of each other instead of being taken for granted. And we can choose to help people now by making sure we expand our healthcare system to include medication coverage for every single person in our country. Everyone. We can build. We do. We can build 500,000 affordable units across this country, non-profit, non-market, cooperative housing, and keep the dream of owning a home alive. We can tear down the barriers to education so young people have a bright future, so they can realize their dreams. And we can...
These people here, they can be successful.
Yes. We can also transform into a green economy where we defend our environment, create incredible opportunities for jobs and good salaries while reducing our emissions. That's what we can do. And we can work honestly. We can work honestly towards reconciliation with the first people of this land, with Indigenous communities. That's why, my friends, I'm asking you all to keep this fight going for the next 8 months. I need you to be a part of this. I need your energy. I need your passion. I need you to be a part of this. The people at the top and the wealthiest corporations have had it way too good for way too long. You need someone on your side for once. Les plus riches et les grandes entreprises ont déjà eu quelqu'un de leur côté. On a besoin de quelqu'un de notre parti, notre côté. So, my friends, together, if we come together, we can chart a new course for Canada. Yes, we can. Together, we can lift up the people around us so we all rise. Together, we can build a brighter future now before it's too late. We can do this together, my friends. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. Yes. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We are listening to NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh, now the newest victor in the Burnaby South by-election. He has won, just finished delivering his victory speech. I'm Vassy, and I'm here with Éric Grenier. We've been listening in. Lots of talk, Éric, about sort of doing away with the old way of doing things, and speaking about a number of items that relate to that, highlighting the SNC issue and sort of talking about the idea of corporations getting what they want, the Liberals and the Conservatives appeasing the rich, and his message of doing otherwise. Also a very diverse crowd of people around him, which is, I think, something to watch going forward. Definitely part of the NDP's plans in who their target voter might be and where they're looking to make some gains, where there is opportunity to make some gains. What did you think of the message in his speech?
Yeah, I think he's hit a lot of the points that the NDP has been trying to hit. I mentioned pharmacare as one of them. It was interesting to hear him go after the Conservatives a little bit.
Yes.
We don't hear him say that very much. So that was an interesting thing to hear from him. I have to say he looks pretty relieved. He looks pretty happy. We've seen him give a number of speeches. I would say this is one of his better ones. He did seem to be a little bit more comfortable in the role in a really kind of campaign-style speech. I think for him, a good showing for the NDP, and I think they're pretty happy that they were able to win this and win it pretty comfortably.
Where are we at right now? 38 points.
Oh, he's going to be taking some questions?
Oh, he's going to take some questions.
Questions from the media. I just want to shout out some people. Just give me. I'm going to give a couple
some
people
shout
some
outs,
quick
then
love.
he's going to take some media questions.
We're going to reset.
We're going to listen into those
from
questions.
the
I
media.
have to run upstairs again for another
Everybody,
hit.
hang
So if I'm
tight.
not here,
But I just want you to cheer for a couple people.
Éric will be waving goodbye to the viewers.
I will, yes.
I just want to shout out a couple
I
people.
want to thank everyone, though.
So you already know that we've got
Keep watching.
incredible
We'll listen to these questions.
members of my caucus, my colleagues that are here. I want to shout out, Don Davies is right here to my right. We've got the incredible...
Well, we're looking at Jagmeet Singh, 38% right now in this riding. This is a riding that was won by Kennedy Stewart with about 35% of the vote, so he did better than that result. And what we're seeing lately is the numbers between the Conservatives and the Liberals getting a lot closer. Now it's 26% for Richard T. Lee of the Liberals and 23% for Jay Shin of the Conservatives. One of the questions had been whether the pipeline issue, the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion, had any impact on this riding, and maybe, because that was a low result for the Liberals. in Burnaby South.
Well, let's just jump right to it. Shout out to Burnaby Council for all the
Lots of shout-outs going on. There were a few shout-outs to MPs who are there, Jenny Kwan and Don Davies, and then also to his brother, who is kind of by his side and has been right from the beginning.
He's an Ontario MPP right now. He succeeded his brother in Brampton East.
I want to shout out the Burnaby MLAs who helped out so much on this campaign.
We're waiting once again for Mr. Singh to take questions from the media. He indicated that after the shout-outs, that's what he'll be doing. So we're going to be standing by to watch that.
And my brother who lent me his right arm.
Oh, okay. Apparently, I have to leave right now because there might be some technical difficulties on the National, so I got to run to do it. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching.
The people in Burnaby are really excited.
So I'll stick with you, and we'll see what the questions that Jagmeet Singh will take. And
thank you, sir. Thank you, Mayor.
I'm sure he'll be relieved. He's not going to be answering questions about his future as leader of the NDP. I think he's pretty safe in that position right now.
Shout out. I know there's a number of other council members here that helped out in the campaign.
Thanking everybody in the crowd. And he did get quite a bit of help from the provincial NDP, for example, which he thanked, the local NDP MPs in the area. This is one of the reasons why the narrative might have changed in this riding, because so many people were helping out in this riding, how many resources were being poured into it. It raises the question of what would have happened if the NDP had poured as many resources and efforts into Outremont. Would the result have been any different there? But certainly, winning in Burnaby South, electing their leader, and giving him a seat in the House of Commons was given priority, and looks like that was the right thing to do.
I knew Don would help me out. And Nick Volko, everybody.
A very relieved Jagmeet Singh.
Thank you, Nick.
Who has won the Burnaby South by-election.
Shout out my colleague.
We're just waiting to see, waiting for him to answer questions from the media.
Vancouver, Kennedy Stewart, for all his great work.
Just to catch you up, the Liberals won the by-election of Outremont. Rachel Bendayan.
I'm looking right over here.
And
I got, are you ready?
All right, I think here comes a question.
Over at my good friend. We got a question coming from the media.
There you go.
So we're ask.
Richard Zussman, Global News, congratulations.
Thank you very much, sir.
What are you going to do now to reverse the sagging polling numbers for the NDP nationally?
Well, what we're going to do is get to work. We're going to fight for people and show them that they don't have to put up with a government in Ottawa that's too busy handing out gifts to SNC-Lavalin, to the pharmaceutical industry, continuing to subsidize oil and gas. Instead, they can choose to have the New Democrats who will fight for them be on their side, be in their corner.
How are you going to reverse the fundraising numbers? I understand the party's having a hard time raising money. How are you going to raise money?
Well, we're confident that people across Burnaby South are feeling let down. They're feeling disappointed because this Liberal government hasn't delivered the change that they promised. People are still hurting. Their lives are not better 3.5 years later. And we're going to speak with those folks. We're going to let them know that they matter, they care, and we're going to offer our plan, present our plan, which is to build 500,000 affordable homes, to build a more accessible country where we expand our medication coverage to every single Canadian, and we build a green economy where we invest in technology that reduces the impact on the environment and creates great jobs. So this plan is going to inspire people. Thank you. We've got another question.
Mr. Singh, it's Laura Lynch from CBC, and you can't see me all the way up there, but congratulations.
Thank you very much.
You made a special mention of Quebecers tonight and made a special pitch to them, and yet you lost, your party lost in Outremont. You also managed to criticize SNC-Lavalin, which may not go over well in Quebec. How are you planning to hold on to NDP support in the province?
Well, I got to acknowledge that Julia Sanchez ran a great campaign. She did a great job. But we always know that Outremont riding was going to be a tough riding. We always knew that. But when it comes to what people in Quebec care about the environment. They don't like the fact that the Liberal Party and the Prime Minister just purchased a pipeline. That is not what they believe is the right use, the responsible use of our taxpayer dollars. They want to see us invest in green energy. They want to see us invest in the green economy. So we're going to continue to fight for Quebecers. And I've talked about next week going to Quebec to present our plan, to lay out our plan for Quebec, because we know that we've got a great team out there, we've got a great team of MPs, and we're going to continue to offer a vision that inspires the people of Quebec. Yes.
Hi, Jagmeet. It's Laura Kane from Canadian Press. I want to know how you're going to unite the party and your caucus behind you. You have faced a lot of internal criticism over the low fundraising, over low support in the polls. How are you going to bring your caucus and your party together behind you now?
Well, I believe, and I've spent time with people at the doorsteps, and it's clear to me that all New Democrats are committed to making sure that people in their riding, their voices and their concerns are brought to Ottawa. And we're all united. We're all united in that vision. We're all united in the vision of making sure our governments stand up for people, not for the powerful and the well-connected. So I'm confident that we'll be able to work together on those shared values that we all have. And every one of my team knows that that's what our job is, to fight for the people that don't have a voice.
Of attention to what your win means nationally, but I want to know what it means locally. What are you going to do for the residents of Burnaby South?
Just ask you to repeat that again.
Sorry, what are you going to do for the residents of Burnaby South and for British Columbia as a whole?
Sure. Well, the concerns that we heard at the doorsteps, that my team heard everywhere we went, when we went to community events, when we spoke to people at community centers, when we spoke to people that we met and phoned, the concerns were housing. Housing was the top concern across this riding, and what we're committed to doing is immediate action. We're fast-tracking, we're calling for the fast-tracking of investments to build new cooperative housing and new non-market housing immediately. We're calling for a return to the time when the federal government used to build housing. Back in the 70s, back in the late 40s, we used to build hundreds and thousands of affordable homes. I want to get back into doing that so people can still dream of and actually achieve the dream of owning a home.
Mr. Singh, Jason D'Souza, CBC News.
Hey, Jason.
We've seen how contentious this by-election has been, both between the candidates, but as well between the supporters. Obviously, a number of the public debates, the tensions and emotions ran very high. What kind of tone do you think that might set for the general election come the fall?
Well, I think the tone comes from the fact that people are frustrated. There's a lot of frustration, there's a lot of anger, and there's some folks that are going to use that anger and frustration and direct it towards people that are not responsible. New Canadians and people that are fleeing persecution are not responsible for the problems that we're faced with. Governments in Ottawa are responsible. Their lack of prioritizing people is responsible. So we're going to make better choices. We're going to address the fact that people want to have a bright future. They want to know that their kids have a bright future. And so we're going to make the choices that put people first and that deal with the problems they're faced with. And we'll address that uncertainty and that fear by giving people hope and something to dream and something to look forward to. And I'm confident we can do that.
Éric, Globe and Mail, congratulations on your election. What do you say, though, about the symbolism?
Sorry, my friend.
Sorry?
You could just start. There was a little bit of applause when you started. Just can you start that again?
Sorry, go ahead. What do you say about the symbolism? Tonight you've won in Burnaby South, but you lost in Outremont, where the Orange Wave began. You say you're going to talk to Quebecers, but you've already talked to Quebecers, and still you lost Outremont tonight. What are you going to do to try and turn things around in Quebec? Does it matter to you if you lose ground in Quebec?
Thank you. So, first off, we always knew that Outremont was going to be a tough riding, but we've got an incredible team of MPs in Quebec. We know that the people of Quebec are not happy with some of the policies that this government, the Liberal government, has brought forward. They're upset at the lack of respect for the culture and identity. They're concerned about offshore tax havens. They're really disappointed in the Liberal government's decision to buy a pipeline. We know that there's folks in Quebec that care deeply about the environment. On those issues, the Liberals have let them down. The Conservatives don't care about those particular issues. New Democrats want to build a brighter future where we invest in the green economy, where we create great jobs and reduce our emissions. We would not have purchased a pipeline with our taxpayer dollars. Instead, we would invest that money in the future, which is green energy, renewable energy. So we're confident.
As a follow-up to go to a question you were asked earlier, is there a risk in slagging SNC-Lavalin? It may play in Burnaby South. Is there a risk that it could cost you support in Quebec, where many Quebecers work for the company?
Well, even Canadians across this country, including Quebecers, don't believe we should be giving preferential treatment to one corporation, that if you're well-connected and powerful, you can just call up the Prime Minister and have them change the laws to get you off the hook. No one believes that's a good way to run a country, and Quebecers also don't believe that that's the way we should run a country.
You talked about you're going to be in Quebec next week. You're leading a national party into a federal election. Are the people of Burnaby South going to be left behind? Are you still going to be able to represent those people in Ottawa?
Not at all. The people of Burnaby South were left behind by a Liberal government that chose not to deal with the housing crisis. The people of Burnaby South were left behind by a Prime Minister who purchased a pipeline that the people did not want. The people of Burnaby South were left behind by a Liberal Party and a Prime Minister that doesn't believe in expanding our health care to ensure that everyone in our country is covered with medication coverage. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to fight for affordable housing. We're going to build new units. We're going to push for investments in co-ops and nonprofit and non-market housing. We're going to expand our healthcare system and push for solutions that solve people's problems.
Just as a follow-up to that, how much time between now and the election are you going to split between being everywhere else and actually being here in Burnaby South?
Well, as any MP, my job is to take the concerns that I've heard here in Burnaby South and take them to Ottawa. So I'm going to do that job. I'm going to make sure the concerns that I've heard, the people's voice is going to be heard loud and clear when I take my seat in the House of Commons. And Burnaby South and the Lower Mainland are incredibly important to us as New Democrats. We're going to continually be here and have a strong presence here. That's it. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here. We're going to start the party soon. I'm going to get on the mic. We're going to get some music starting. So get ready, get your dancing feet ready, because we're going to turn this into a party now.
Jagmeet Singh, I'm sorry. Jagmeet Singh is leader of the NDP and newly elected MP for the riding of Burnaby South. And as he just said, the party's about to get started with some singing there in Burnaby. Certainly a very relieved NDP leader. He had been struggling without a seat in the House of Commons. He wanted to get one, and the voters of Burnaby South have given one to him. So that's Jagmeet Singh, newly elected MP for Burnaby South. And he had a good result there in Burnaby South. So he took about 38.7% of the vote. That's where we are now with 92% of the votes counted. Turnout was quite low. Right now we're standing at 27%. It'll go up as a bit more of the votes are counted. But a good result for the NDP leader at about 39%. The Liberals finished second in the riding with 26%, which is Richard T. Lee, the Liberal candidate, quite a bit lower than last time, where only 547 votes separated Kennedy Stewart, the former NDP MP, who is now the mayor of Vancouver, and the Liberal candidate there. So a good win for Jagmeet Singh, the Conservatives finishing third with 23%, and the People's Party candidate, Laura Lynn Thompson, finishing fourth with 11%. Burnaby South elects Jagmeet Singh. He'll be heading to Ottawa. There were two other by-elections that took place as well in other parts of the country. In York Simcoe, which was a Conservative stronghold, Conservative small businessman Scott Davidson took 53% of the vote, so up about 3 points from where Peter Van Loan had been in the 2015 election, and 30% for Sean Tanaka of the Liberals finished in second place, and third place here went to the NDP's Jessa McLean. So a win there for Scott Davidson, and Vassy Kapelos is now rejoining after doing the national. Excuse me. And then just to finish off, in Outremont, Rachel Bendayan was elected for the Liberals, taking that iconic NDP seat which had elected Tom Mulcair in 2007. The NDP finished in second place there. Julia Sanchez with 28% of the vote. Incredible performance for the NDP there compared to where they have been standing in the polls, but still a disappointing loss for them. And finishing in third place with a bit of a surprise was the Greens with 13%. Daniel Green, who is the deputy leader, one of the deputy leaders of the Green Party, with a bit of a surprising third place finish there. So Liberal victories in Outremont, Conservative in York Simcoe, and of course, Jagmeet Singh, NDP, and Burnaby South.
A three-way split. We had a great question from someone who said, is this just an indication that the election's going to be all over the map and all split up
too close to call.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Lots of reasons to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, at least we're not going to be doing the next couple months about an NDP leadership race as well. I mean, that would have just been a bit crazy ahead of an election campaign. So now Jagmeet Singh heading here to Ottawa, and the NDP can start thinking about October.
And we're going to have tons of analysis tomorrow on PNP. We'll have it online. I'm sure you'll be writing something spectacular for.
Check for that.
I will be, and I'm sure everyone will be. So I think that's it for us, right?
I think we're done.
Singh is done. Okay, thank you everyone so much for watching and for tuning in with us and sending us your questions. They were such great questions. We appreciate it. Thank you, Éric, for all your insight, and I hope everyone has a great evening, and we'll see you tomorrow.